Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Naruto. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Somebody turn out the lights. Someone most assuredly did not dim them. If anything, they burned ever brighter, blinding Naruto. He tried to raise an arm against it, shield his face a little, only to find that he lacked a limb by which to do so. Lacked a lot of things, really. Arms, legs, a body at all. He looked down, and as much as one without a corporeal form could look, and beheld his form, little more than a wisp of light in the void. He could see, could hear, could think, but he couldn't feel. Not a damn thing. Panic hit him for all of a moment before reality and his memory reasserted itself properly. Don't underestimate me, you inferior creature. Come, Hatsutsuki, let me show you what true resolve is. You'd throw your life away for this? Is that truly what you want, to drag us both to hell? Right, I died, didn't I? The realization numbed him. Iski, Bari in mode, Kurama. He'd gone down fighting and taken that damn madman him. Was it wrong that he felt a petty flash of satisfaction with that lunatic gone? No one would be able to threaten his family. His life was a small price to pay for that. He would have gladly paid the price himself if it meant sparing Kurama. But if this was the afterlife, then it wasn't at all what it was cracked up to be. Where were the fields of flowers, his loved ones, the pearly gates? He saw nothing beyond an endless expanse of nothing. Shadow and darkness, as far as he could see. There was nothing here. No deity to congratulate or condemn him, no great presence to send him on his way, nothing at all. It chilled him more than he cared to admit. He wanted out. Out of here, out of this place, out. Craning what passed for his neck, he spied a glimmer of brilliance in the void. Where am I? Hold on, oh, I see a light. On a whim he walked towards it. Everything lurched and his vision swam. When he blinked it away, the world had reasserted itself into. He blinked. Once, twice, thrice now. Why are my hands so small? Reality came back in fits and spurts, and he found himself blinking at a pair of small, pudgy palms. He felt his spirit sucked out and down, crammed into a form several sizes too small for his liking. Indignation sparked, and he tried to lift his hands higher, only to fail miserably. Someone was holding him, hoisting him upright, and it was still so damnably bright. It's a boy. Someone, a woman, spoke just out of view. We shall name him Miquella. Excuse me, that's not my name. There was another one there, too, a tiny little squalling babe, bundled up in swaddling cloth. Her face was a newborn pink, a tuft of red hair crowning her head. Healthy pair of lungs on that one. A screamer, through and through. He almost felt bad for her. No. Don't get distracted. Malenia. The woman's voice came on again. Isn't she lovely? Wait. I have a sister. The hell is this? Realization proved slow to pounce, but once it did, his world ran cold. No. Yes, fate seemed to laugh at him. No, I am not going through diaper hell again. Absolutely no. Once was more than enough. He tried to squint his eyes and force himself awake, hoping, praying this was a dream. No such look. Through his dim vision he beheld his doom. Damn it, he couldn't move the way he wanted. Everything was getting fuzzy, and it took all his willpower just to think. Is the boy all right again? The woman's voice tugged him back to reality. I know not, said someone nearby. He's been awfully quiet. Scowling fiercely, Naruto shifted his head as best he could. This feeble body didn't want to cooperate and glared wide red daggers at those holding him. He spied a golden-haired woman and a man with striking locks a pace away, each pale of face, each bearing striking golden eyes. They were staring at him so, as though expecting something from him. At long last, his temper slipped the leash. Naruto tried to speak, tried to shout, and that, at least, he succeeded. His cry blew their hair back. Why, listen to the lungs on him. I'll give you lungs. He shouted wordlessly and was rewarded with a wince from those he could only assume to be the parents of this body. Not his parents, not Minato, not Kushina. He wasn't about to get attached to two perfect strangers. No sir, not him, no chance in hell. There was absolutely no way he would. The babe beside him whimpered. All his anger flew out the window, sure as an arrow in flight. Naruto blew out an explosive sigh. Irritated as he was, he couldn't bear to hear a baby cry. Even if he'd apparently been reborn as one, he wasn't that heartless. Never could be. And so he cast about with his sixth sense. Those, at least, were quite intact. This new body felt odd, but there was power in it. In time it might even outstrip his old body. And yet there was something wrong with it, a faint gnawing sensation he couldn't quite place. Another frustrated shout built in the back of his throat. The baby Melenia whimpered anew, perhaps sensing his festering ire. Naruto sighed inwardly. Can't believe I'm even considering this. The woman spoke again, much to the blonde's infinite chagrin. Dear Miquella, may you grow big and strong. Naruto said exactly what he thought of that. He would not be forgotten. One way or another. Forget me not. Miquella. That was the only warning Naruto received. He still wasn't used to that name. Even now, it always took a second to respond. Not nearly enough time to react. He barely had a chance to close his journal before a whirl of wild red hair and green cloth hurtled across the bedroom and crashed into his back at speed. Truly, he never stood a chance. He teetered forward with a yelp and crashed face first into a pillow as someone bore him down, all but burying the leather tome beneath his body. A pair of slim arms wrapped around his chest. Not a moment later he felt a warm face nestle against his back. Her pleased hum rose in his ears. Caught you, he sighed against her. So you did. Can you let go now? Malenia nuzzled closer with a contented sigh. I do not wish to. A sardonic smile touched the corner of Naruto's mouth. Blast this feeble body. Even at the age of 5 he still couldn't move the way he wanted. She wasn't going to let him be until she had her fill. His twin, as he'd learned early on, liked to cuddle. Ever refined and elegant in public, she dropped that facade right quick when they were alone. She nudged his back with her nose. You're warm. Sig. Such a greedy girl. Still, she was his sister. Sort of. Technically. Nothing wrong with a bit of bonding every now and again. She hummed into his shoulders. Whatever will I do with you? Naruto looked up in her arms with a squawk. You're the one picking fights. Malenia must be the redhead in you. She thumped him with a pillow and he fell out his cot with a laugh. They were children, after all. I take it you're feeling better. She'd been scratching herself an awful lot lately. If she felt safe enough to glomp him like this, then surely she must be better. Right. Naruto sniffed once, frowned at the sweet, sickly scent emanating from her. He knew that smell. He'd grown up with it these last 5 years. Wriggling in her grasp, he pivoted to face her and glared up at his clingy other half. Hand. Melenia released him and jerked back as if she'd been scalded. I beg your pardon. Naruto didn't budge. Not a jot. Hand. No. She flushed. I'm fine, Miquela. He snapped his fingers. Hand. She complied with a little whine, a noise she'd never make in public. Even then she dithered a moment. Under his unflinching stare she reluctantly began to roll up her right sleeve. Slowly at first, tentatively even, and he knew full well why. She was ashamed of this, afraid of it. For good reason. Sure enough, they were dark, calcified patched on her skin. Naruto inhaled sharply despite himself. Again. It's nothing. She made to roll down her sleeve but he caught her wrist. Did you tell Mom you're feeling ill again? She looked down. No. Naruto fixed her with a look that could make Maliketh quail, but Melenia merely hung her head. She could be so terribly stubborn when she wanted to be. Just like their mother. Of course she was. They only had one another. For 5 years now Mom had sequestered them away from their siblings, from a family they barely knew. All because of this Malenia's illness. If she knew Malenia was suffering a relapse, she would doubtlessly put them into further isolation. And he couldn't bear to see his sister suffer so. Naruto dragged himself upright with a sigh. Fine, fine. Hold still. Closing his eyes, he pulled on the tattered threads of his strength. Much of his might had followed him into this world, but not all of it. Not Kurama. Still, he wasn't without his tricks. He pulled on those fraying threads now with gusto, weaving them out of himself and into the trembling arm of his sister. He wrapped them around the patches of rot. There was resistance, of course. It always felt like something fought him whenever he tried to treat his sister. Nevertheless, he forced the rot to retreat, battering the blight back with sheer will alone. He fought on, even as the act of doing so sapped his strength, taking just a little more from him than before. Malenia made a little noise of relief. Thank you. That's much better. Sure enough, when he opened his eyes, her arm was hale and healthy as always. Hale, whole. She often was for a few days. He didn't want to imagine what might happen without these treatments. It was almost as if she were crumbling from within. But that was a silly thought, wasn't it? He'd have to do more research. Ugh. Which meant more lessons with Radahn and yet more reading. He hated reading. I'm sorry, brother. Sensing his gaze, little Malenia hung her head and chewed at her lower lip. How much did it take from you this time? Not much. The lie came to him easily. She didn't need to know just how draining these sessions were. I'm fine. See, he held up an arm and feigned a flex. Good as new. You have problems too, you know. Naruto knew did, and he didn't deny it. This new body of his was growing slowly. Too slowly, some might say. Melenia was his twin, but she was already nearly a good head taller than him. Whereas it felt like he had to physically force his body to age at times. Who knew what next year would bring? It was a sobering thought, just as before. Dread reared its ugly head. What if I'm stuck like this? What if I don't grow up? Damn it, I don't want to be a runt again. He struck down that wild thought. His current state didn't matter. Melenia mattered. She was all that mattered. There was something afoot here, but by the log he couldn't figure out what. He could only treat the symptom of her disease, never the cause. And each time he drove the rot out, it came back stronger. It won't be enough. The words slipped out before he could hold them back, and his shame with them. Something was bound to break at this rate. Be it him or Melenia. He couldn't allow that. He'd been brought into this second life for a damn good reason, and it wasn't to fail. Fate couldn't be that cruel. It just couldn't. There had to be a way to cure her. There just had to be. Don't worry, dear brother. Melenia perked up on a sudden, golden eyes alight. I can protect you. I'll be your blade. Naruto bit his lips to hold back a peal of bemused laughter. Melenia, this scrawny girl, protect him. He wasn't so weak that he needed a bodyguard, even now. But she was looking at him again with those earnest golden eyes, waiting for his answer, squirming under his gaze. She just wanted to help him. How could he deny her? On a whim he reached out and laid a hand on her head. If that's what you want. But you'll need to train hard if you want to catch up with me. It is, she pouted. And I will just you wait. I'll become strong. I'll find the finest instructors. No one will harm you under my watch. Adorable. Must protect. I'll hold you to that. He said the words in jest, but by the way her expression tightened, she took them seriously. But don't be in such a hurry to grow up. Hey, we've got our whole lives ahead of us, you know. Melenia surged forward and embraced him tightly. Dearest Miquella, oh, brother, we'll be together forever, won't we? Naruto felt his heart twitched as he returned her hug. He wasn't sure that was a promise he could make. Sure we will. He did the small of her back and smiled for her sake. He'd be damned if he didn't try. 'Tis a fool's quest you're on, little Miquella. By the sage, Naruto hated that word. Little, loathed it he did, with every fiber of his being. Runt, small, tiny, each had become synonymous with scorn, a near-constant mockery toward him in the years since he'd met his so-called siblings, common criticism that nearly all his so-called brothers and sister defaulted to in the heat of the moment. He kept his head buried in his book and didn't rise to the bait. Come to bother me again, have you? I'm not in the mood. Renna tilted her head, and he just knew that she was looking down at him with something dangerously akin to pity. Did you not hear me? What do you hope to accomplish alone? Golden eyes remained glued to the page. More than your taunts. I am not taunting him. He heard her cough into a fist before she comported herself. Why must you provoke me so? Because you've been come here to my chambers. He thumbed through another page, frowned, then cast the book aside when he realized it wasn't what he sought. Every damn day, for the last week. I swear, if this is your idea of flirting, sister, I don't know whether to be embarrassed for you or appalled. He took perverse pleasure in the sputter that followed. It lasted all of a moment before Renna rallied. You cannot cure the rot through the order. You of all people know this. In that, her words rang true. He'd long since plumbed the secrets of the Golden Order. It had nothing left for him to learn, and so he'd turned to other methods. Despite their criticisms, or perhaps in spite of them, he had made progress. He learned more every day no matter what they might say. Let them call his work heresy. He didn't care. Every day that Malenia could smile made his suffering worthwhile. The old man also said I couldn't start growing my own tree. He flicked his fingers outward, calling another book to his hand, this one a tome on that of the formless mother. Funny thing, that. A hand grabbed hold of the book and wrestled it down. You should not say such things where others can hear you. Naruto scoffed. I could say the same of your taunting. He had but one true sister. Renna was not Malenia. She could never be Malenia, no matter how alike they might look, they were worlds apart. Still couldn't hate her. He shouldn't. She was his half-sister, even if she did infuriate him. Don't hate. Don't hate. Come now. Rykard stepped out behind his sister and laid a hand on her shoulder. Let the boy dream. Naruto exhaled heavily. Thanks. Now if you could just. Even if it is a fool's dream. It was too much. For a moment, his temper slipped. His eyes blazed with fresh heat. Who asked you? No one, Rykard retorted, serpentine gaze narrowing upon him. Which is precisely why I feel I must speak up. Abandon this foolish pursuit while you still can, little one. Naruto bit his lip until he tasted. It helped center him. A hand slipped behind his back. Renna slapped Rykard's arm. Stop. You'll rile him. Her brother only laughed. Dear sister, was that not thy intentak? A wave of golden light smote her sibling in the chest to launch him from the chamber. To his credit, Rykard made it to all of one knee before a heavy tome caromed off his head and knocked him down again. Renna drew back, her irritated expression now bordering on outright panic. Naruto lowered his palm, fingers still smoking. Oops, guess my aim is a little off today. Care to try again? Rykard's face flashed an alarming shade of puce. Why, you little. What's all this now? A shadow fell over him before Hai could finish, bringing a mighty voice with it. Rykard wiped a thin line from his lip. Just a little chat, brother. Nothing to concern yourself with. And yet I find myself mightily concerned regardless. Naruto heaved a sigh of relief. Radahn was large and growing larger every year. Already he stood head and shoulders over them all. Soon he'd have to crouch just to avoid banging his head on the archways. Youngest of the trio though he was, his raw power was unmatched among them. Even a snake like Rykard wouldn't dare try anything in his presence. Evidently Renna feared he would, because she dragged her battered brother off with a harsh word. Radahn lingered until he was certain they were gone, bless his simple soul. Forgive her, Miquella. Only then did he turn to face him. She was trying to help, you know, before Rykard came. You'd do well to steer clear of him. Yeah, wait, you call that help? He laughed. You didn't let her finish. Naruto squinted a little. Should I have? Indeed. Radahn chortled, patted his back, and departed. Wait until the end of the day, and you'll see. In the end, Naruto was left scratching his head. I have the weirdest family in this world. A book thumped down by Naruto's head. Against his better judgment, he looked up from his work. Was it night already? He'd lost track of time. Sure enough, he found a familiar redhead standing there, hand planted upon her hip. His gaze flitted to the emerald green cover of the tome sheet. Flung his eye. What's this? The records of the Carrion family. Renna plonked down beside him and thumbed the worn tome open. Idly, he noticed she'd marked certain pages and that her fingers were lined with paper cuts. Every instance of rot ever encountered is listed within these pages. Naruto accepted it with all the reverence it was due. Thank you. It might not be possible to save her. I've never heard of someone being born with this. Even so, I'll try. I would do the same for my kin. Even so, I'd warn you away from Rykard. Steer clear of him. Don't worry. He held up a hand. Radahn already warned me about that bugger. She flushed. Is it so? I'll have words with him. Now move over. They studied long into the night. Little Miquella, whatever will I do with thee? It began with a whisper, a tiny, careless thing, something Naruto never would have paid attention to under any other circumstance. He nearly didn't this time at that. He would have ignored it entirely had it been anyone else saying it. He could ignore most insults. A great deal, really. But when it came from, "Don't," he forced the word out through grit teeth. "Don't call me that." "Why ever not, Marika?" Mother hummed as she ran a comb through his golden hair. "You'll always be my little boy." The twitching intensified. She hadn't even meant it in a cruel manner. "Have I offended thee? If so, I apologize. Know that size matters not." She swatted him on the nose. "Didst thou think I was this tall before mine ascension?" Him. "Easy for you to say." His second mother scoffed. "If you are cursed, then overcome it as I did. When I was born, an oracle declared that I would die at 10 years of age. 'T was a curse, or so she said. Yet here I am." The smugness in her voice was nothing short of opaque. "Eternal, immortal, and I am not blind to your schemes." Naruto stilled. Marika could be right sneaky when she wanted to be, fear sneakier than he gave her credit for. Even now she was speaking to him as one would an errant son, but he knew her intentions ran far deeper than that. Any clue he gave would be immediately seized upon. He refused to give her the satisfaction. "He wished to save thy sister." It was not a question. To why clever by half he bit his lip, to which she turned him about in her lap. "Such a goal is commendable," her hand patted his, "but you must not let it consume you." "I won't." Marika hummed. "It's just, I worry about her, you know." Another nod. "HM. Are you even listening to me?" "I always listen." She tweaked his ear. "Just as I always watch." Something in her words had him perking up. "I heard you and little Ranny visited the archives yesterday." "Yeah. It is good that the two of you have reconciled. I would not say nay to such a union." Mom, Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. "She's my half-sister. Better than thy full sister." She clicked her tongue in mild admonishment. "I've seen the way thine eyes linger upon one another. The two of you were cursed through my own foolishness. We, that is to say I and Radahn, are one and the same. We had thought to outsmart the outer gods. Yet thy sister is cursed with rot, and thou are aging more and more slowly with each passing year." Naruto glared at his small hands, embittered by the reminder. "I'll find a way around it. Of that I have no doubt." She had his cheek. "Such a mom thing to do. I only ask that you set a goal for thyself afterwards." "I'll think about that." Another thought dawned. "Why are you and Dad fussing over us today, anyway?" "Why, I'm so glad you asked." Her smile had far too many teeth. "I would have thee both look thine best for the 2 fingers." Dread dawned. He wanted nothing to do with that ghastly thing again. "I have somewhere to be." "I think not." She caught him by the waist and reeled him back into her lap, heedless of his squirming. "This has been a long time in coming. But I don't want to." He grumbled a little as her brush caught a snarl in his hair. He'd only ever met the fingers once, but it wasn't an experience he cared to repeat. Melenia was lucky in that regard. Thanks to her sickness she'd been kept far away from them until today. At least she'd be suffering with him. She cast him a commiserating look across the chamber. He beheld the crown of flowers in her hair, who knew Radahn had it in him, and his breath hitched a little. As he looked on her, slim shoulders rolled in a shrug, as if to say, "What can we do?" A great deal if he wanted, but acting out here might well break this body of his. "Today is the day you receive your shadows." Marika's solemn voice drew him back to the present. "Comport yourself well, and your audience will be a short one." "Shadows," she said. He wasn't fooled for a moment. They were precious Imperions after all. This was just another way of binding them to the fingers, and the greater will with it. No doubt these shadows would turn on them the moment they strayed from the precepts of the Golden Order. And make no mistake, he intended to do just that. Not yet, but soon. He wouldn't get attached to whomever they gave him. He refused. Melenia was first and foremost in his mind. Marika and Radahn were a close second. There wasn't room for anyone else. He couldn't afford it. "Mine shadow is Maliketh, as you well know." Marika continued to pace, smoothing out the last tangle in his golden locks. "He was given to me when I was young, and he grew alongside me. Likewise for little Randy and Blade. That said, I understand the fingers have prepared special vassals for you and Malenia." Now that caught his interest. "No wolves," she grimaced. "No wolves." Naruto gulped. "Great. Children of Marika, we bid thee welcome." Malenia tried not to flinch away from the voice. She was 10. She was brave. She was a big girl. She mustn't show fear here. Easier said than done, that. The 2 fingers were even worse than she'd thought they'd be. 2 giant digits fused to what had once been a hand, hunched over them in all its hairy, grisly glory. Heralds of the greater will though they claimed to be, it was not they who spoke, but rather a wizened old crone sat upon a stool beside them. It didn't help that the chamber was so darkly lit, with little more than candles to see by. It lent the room an off-putting, smoky haze. Made everything feel proper eerie, it did. She didn't like it. Now more than ever she wished mother and father were here with them. But alas, the fingers had insisted. This meeting was to be between them and them alone. Yet for all that, dear Miquella seemed utterly at his ease. So he planted one hand on his hip. "You wanted to see us, let's get this over with." Indeed, the finger reader tittered. "The greater will is overjoyed to see you both hale and hearty." She cast her eyeless visage. Malenia gagged a little at the sight to gaze upon the holy relic looming over the lot of them. Look how the fingers tremble with anticipation. Above her the dual digits did indeed do something. Malenia wasn't sure it could be called a tremble. Abruptly, her right arm began to ache. She hissed in the dark and clutched at it, fighting the urge to curl up in pain as they spoke. No, not now. Her brother hadn't been able to give her his daily dose today. There simply hadn't been time, not with so many eyes upon them. Now she felt the rot writhe within her, creeping up on her. With it came the whispers, soft, insidious things, tickling at the edge of her. Stop, 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 she hissed at herself. Please stop, I don't want to decay. Miquella stepped up beside her and subtly placed a palm against the small of her back. A jolt shot through her, gradually the pain receded. She heaved a sigh. He disguised it as little more than a kind gesture, but she'd felt his power pour into her just now, bolstering her strength. She didn't miss the way he sagged against her. Malenia stole a glance at him, praying the fingers wouldn't hear. Your curse is getting worse, isn't it? I'm fine, he whispered quickly, for her ears alone. I've still got time. But how much time, brother of mine? Enough, she hissed. Brother. Miquella made a noise of annoyance, nothing more. But today is a day for celebration. Utterly unperturbed by the display, the finger reader prattled on, denying her a chance to pip up. Rather than give thee loyal lealhounds as they did thy mother and sister, the fingers have crafted companions for thee. Miquella flicked her a bemused look. Malenia elbowed her into silence. Thankfully the fingers didn't take offense. Come forth, young ones. By that singular command, two figures stepped from behind the emaciated bulk of the two fingers. Each stood clad in a cloak to hide their faces, one of deep white scarlet, the other a rich navel blue. One tall, the other small. They said not a word, neither of them, each still as stone. Without warning, the shorter of the duo, the one in red, made a beeline for Miquella. The greater will was touched by a vision to create this vassal or you, the finger reader intoned solemnly. Long did they labor to make him. As she spoke, the stranger peeled back their visage, revealing a human face replete with blonde hair and wrought-whiskered cheeks, though his eyes remained closed. Grant them thy name so that they may become yours. The stranger opened their eyes. Melenia recoiled. Miquella gasped. Stark scarlet slits were revealed, bright as itself, slittled like a cater a demon. He had his head toward her dear brother, grinning fit to burst. Hello there. His voice was low, impossibly deep for one so small. 2 little words, nothing more, nothing less, and yet his smile said something more. The duo gazed upon one another for what felt like an eternity. Words unspoken passed between them. She didn't like it. Made her feel left out, it did. Wasn't fair. Well, friend, the stranger, whiskered blonde prodded him, aren't you going to give me a name? Miquella did no such thing. He'd gone terribly still, looked like he'd seen a ghost, even. She'd only ever seen him like this once before. He was not a pleasant memory. Why did he look so pale? That wasn't fear in his eyes, but another. Kurama, it almost sounded like a question to Malenia's ears. Surely not. This odd boy grinned ever wider at his master. See, was that so hard? The two fingers made a pleased sound, ignorant to it all. Good, good. Their finger reader cackled as the boys shared a brisk embrace. A fine name for a strapping young lad. Now for young Malenia. She cursed herself for the slip immediately. Idiot imbecile, she mustn't embarrass herself here. Her shadow was approaching, and she must receive her with all the dignity an Imperion was due. Goodness, she really was quite tall, and her footsteps didn't make the slightest sound. Curiouser and curiouser. The girl in the navy hood knelt before her and tugged off her cowl. Malenia's breath was stolen away. She found herself face to face with a young girl. By contrast, her hair was white as snow, matching the pearl fur dress she wore. Draconic scales dotted her brow and neck, yet for all that face was utterly human. Wait, was that a tail? Trailing behind her legs, it was what manner of shadow was this? This girl was lovely. A pleasure to meet thee, my lady. Her voice was music itself, the most moving of melodies. Wouldst thou grant me my name? With neither word nor warning, name came to Malenia like a shot in the dark. She never knew from where. Priscilla. She swallowed once to comport herself, then rallied. Thy name is Priscilla. The maiden in white beamed brighter than the moon itself. As you will, my mistress. Prove yourself. The Kurama quirked a blonde brow as he lounged atop a pile of cushions. It was a damn strange sight, seeing his former face smirking at him like that. Didn't feel real, yet no less so the venomous retort coming from his mouth. Right back at you, Brett. Prove that you're the Naruto I remember, or I'll gut you like a fish. Easy for you to say. Naruto stepped left. It really isn't. The boy, who may or may not be Kurama, stood and mirrored the motion. Going by Miquella now, or we don't look a damn thing like I remember. That's not ugh. He grit his teeth and stifled a sigh. It's kinda complicated. Kurama granted him a grim grin. Then let's simplify it, shall we? They retired to his chambers for the afternoon, and for once, he was glad Malenia wasn't here by his side. She'd run off to the smithy with Priscilla, something about finding a proper scythe for dear her shadow, because their absence here gave the two of them a chance to air their thoughts away from prying eyes. For now, there was a part of him that didn't dare to hope. It couldn't be Kurama. Not his Kurama. Surely the greater will wasn't this crueler strong enough to pull his old friend back from the void. And yet the longer he stared at him, the more uncertain he became. They'd both died fighting Ishiki, given their lives to put that horned bastard in the ground. Yet something had reincarnated him. Why not Kurama? On 3, he rasped, we both say something only the other would know. Kurama's head bobbed in a nod. Fair. Naruto growled. 1. A smirk. 2. 3. A beat of silence passed between them. And then, you had that stupid Uchiha, we fist bumped in the seal. Their words rang out, echoing in the enclosed room. Naruto found himself rearing back, flushing at that old, accidental memory. That is you. Kurama flung up his arms. That's what I've been saying. Geez, you've gotten tall. Taller than you at any rate, short stuff. Piercing eyes fixed on him. The hell happened to you? Born cursed. He held up a spindly arm and scowled at the lack of muscle there. It's a long story and you died, didn't you, same as me? His partner granted him a snaggle-toothed grin. Rumors of my demise were greatly exag. A heavy pillow smacked him in the face, muffling his retort. Naruto lowered his arm, glaring why red daggers. Finish that sentence at your own peril. While the reincarnated fox spat out a few feathers and flung it back. You're no fun. Something of his stress must have shown through, because that whiskered visage softened. I did die that day, Naruto. I figured. Hush, and let me finish. A clawed hand swatted the back of his head. Apparently there's an afterlife for my kind. Heaven, hell, that sort of thing. He spread his arms wide. Care to guess where I wound up? Naruto clasped his forearm and gave him a head shake for his troubles. You know, I don't remember you being this snarky before. Blame this body. His partner sniped back. I went through a lot of trouble to get it back for us. I believe I deserve a thank you. But why? A shrug. Guess you could say you rubbed off on me. For a fleeting moment he wondered if it was possible to jump into his old form. But no, something in those words tugged at him just now. Kurama had all but admitted to being dead. So how was he standing here before him, grinning from ear to ear? No, he was missing a piece of the puzzle and he didn't much like it. And you got out the afterlife, how, exactly? The no-human fox's grin gained an edge as he returned to lounging. I struck a bargain. Those words do not fill me with confidence. He sat down beside him, determined to have his answers. All right, spill. With whom the greater will? What were the terms? My deal wasn't with the greater will. Kurama smacked his lips, producing an audible pop. Beyond that, I can't tell you. Kurama, sorry. He shook his head slowly, setting his blonde bangs swaying. I'd tell you if I could, but I can't. A clawed finger poked the side of his skull. Part of the deal I made. I'm literally incapable of naming my patron. But I can tell you this. The finger fell, touching his chest. That's me. This is no trick. I'm on your side. Anxiety gnawed at him like a stubborn old hound with a bone. Unless I turn against those filthy fingers. And he just might at this rate, the golden order. What if it? Kurama's grin reminded him of the old days, even with his face. Flay them, why, for all I care. They're useless. An ear twitched. Hey, don't give me that look. The kitsune crossed one leg over the other, tutting softly. I'm not foolish enough to make a deal that'll get me killed again. But greater will must have made that body or had a part in it. So it believes. Kurama's retort had him rocking back into a chair. It certainly crafted Priscilla, but not me. This body, my will, is as much my own as yours. The fingers believe the greater will is in control. It is not. It's been distracted by other matters for quite some time. It was easy to slip in and give it a nudge. They could think this was its idea. I've been around for a few days now. He inspected his marked hand with a sigh. Fingers were just keeping me and the girl hidden. It's been a pain in the ass. It was almost too good to be true. It really is you, isn't it? In the flesh. Or well, lack thereof. He tugged on his arm. This'll take some getting used to, not having tails or fur. Don't worry, I can fight just fine. Naruto gnawed at his lower lip, worrying it between his teeth. He didn't like all this secrecy, and he disliked the idea of Kurama wearing his old face even less, but what choice did he have? He'd be a fool to turn him away. At the end of the day, this was undoubtedly his old friend. He sniffled a little. Stubborn old bastard, you just couldn't stay dead, could you? Says the man trapped in a child's body. Speaking of which, as he spoke, the old fox offered him his right hand, revealing a weathered palm. There was a mark there, etched beneath the scar tissue, but Naruto found he couldn't see it. His vision blurred out of focus when he tried to concentrate on it, almost as if something were actively preventing him from recognizing the crest therein. A silent shiver shot down his spine. In the end, he was left with no choice but to squint at it. What's this? This time, Kurama's GRN was of the brotherly variety. A temporary remedy for your problem. Despite his best efforts, Naruto felt his will falter. What? You're saying a handshake's gonna fix me? Not for very long, but you're burning up your own life force to save that new sister of yours. Surely you know this. Joke's on you. He bridled, feeling defensive despite the insinuation. I've got a lot. Kurama tutted once. Not as much as you used to. Then I'll use whatever I can to save her, he bit back, biting down on an ember of anger. The formless mother, the dragons, even the frenzied flame if need be. I will save her. I know you will. A hand touched forehead. And that's why I'm here. Do you trust me? He hesitated, giving me some real bad vibes here, Kurama. All you need to do is trust me, Naruto. Slitted eyes stared into the very depths of his soul. Then everything will work out sooner or later. Quick as a flash he reached out and clasped his hand. The world lurched. Naruto felt something back in his back as he grew by several inches, his robe pulling taut around his once slender frame. It didn't so much hurt as it did startle him, like an army of ants crawling beneath his skin. He felt his bones click and pop, bringing with it a strange sense of numbness. He dropped to a knee, righted himself, then stood. A nearby mirror revealed all, and he found himself, alarmed to see he actually looked his age and not some weary malnourished child on the verge of kicking the bucket. What did you do? A low chuckle filled the room. Call it a booster, of sorts. It won't last for long, whatever cursed you is pretty potent. I can only push it back for a time. His face fell. So it's temporary, then? I'm afraid so. Not sure how many times I can apply it per day, but no, this is good. Great, even. Come on. He climbed to his feet. I want you to meet Melenia. The real Malenia. Miquella was taller, very tall indeed. Malenia found that required repetition. He was smiling too, grinning from ear to ear as he bantered with his shadow near the fountain. That last bit shouldn't have bothered her so. Her brother was her life, her everything, her all. His happiness was her happiness, his sorrow her sorrow, his rage, her own, so on and so forth. She'd come back early to find him here in the gardens, more alive than he'd ever been. And did she mention the height? To see him in such a silly state should have brought her no small amount of joy. And it did. Really, she was glad to see him laughing and out of pain, but it wasn't with her. The distinction shouldn't have mattered, yet she fondled her fisting at her sides as she approached. She left them for only a few minutes, and already they were getting on famously. "'Tea wasn't fair, my lady." She spared Priscilla a quick glance over her shoulder. "It's nothing." Priscilla was a dear, but her shadow didn't know Miquella the way she did, didn't understand the power of their bond or how terrified she was of losing it. Still, bond or no, this was new. She hastened to his side, forcing her silent shadow to follow. Brother, she almost thought it was a trick of some sort when she finally reached him, a cruel prank played by the greater will. Is that really you? For the first time in years, she found him taller than her. She actually had to look up at him. She rather liked that. Emboldened by the sight of him, she dared to take his hands in hers. "Have you found a cure for your curse? More a treatment for the symptom, not the cause?" Dear Miquella's brother's smile cut through all her fears. "I feel good. Really good." Care to spar? There was an almost impish light to his eyes, rare indeed. He rolled his right shoulder. "There's something I want to test." If that was his wish. Yes, of course. I'd love to." "Great." He took her by the hand and led her deeper into the garden, toward the terrace. She tried to ignore just how damnably warm his hand felt in hers. In doing so, she failed to notice the bemused look Kurama and Priscilla exchanged over their shoulders. She didn't have a proper tutor yet, nor did dear Miquella, but father had drilled some basic unarmed moves into them. Supposedly her brother knew a few spells, but she'd seldom seen him use them. None of that mattered now. They were demigods, after all. To fight was their wont. Ready belatedly, she realized he'd left her to an open circle near the fountain. "Eyes." She took a loose stance. "Whenever you arrive." Miquella exploded into motion, drawing a startled cry from her as his fist flickered past her face. She yelped and ducked back, caught herself, then returned the favor, flinging herself into a wide sweeping kick at his neck. He saw it, swayed aside, and cut a jab at her shoulder. It should have landed. Instead it shot wide. He leaned back, considering his fist. "Balance is off." A frown touched his pale, lovely face. He threw a quick jab, producing another shockwave. "I'll have to get used to it while this lasts." Sunlight struck his back then, and so too did Malenia's heart hit out at her chest. As he was now, Miquella truly was Lovlino. She mustn't allow herself to think such things. This was her brother, her beloved twin. She should not harbor such feelings for her own, cursed though they were. "Come on, then." She dove at him, red hair trailing behind her like a fiery comet. He stepped aside, and used it to yank her close, drawing a cry of pain from her. A spark of anger blazed through her chest. Her eyes flashed and she reared up before he could get in a headlock, smashing the back of her head against his nose. A sharp pop told her she'd won the first real blow. He stumbled away with a laugh. "Ouch, you got me good." "Don't." She glowered at him, rubbing her head. "Pardon." Her twin blinked guilelessly. "Don't pull my hair," she hissed. "It hurts." Hurts. Guilt flashed across his face. "Sorry, didn't think about that." "No, you didn't." She stepped in. "Be better next time." They ranged to and fro, back and forth, all but disregarding their surroundings. Block and parry, feint and counter, grapple and throw. She lost track of the moves they went through. Soon enough it didn't matter. Gentle laughter rang in her ears, and belatedly, she realized the giggling she heard was her own. She was enjoying herself. So was he, if his smile was any indication. Here in this moment, it was just the two of them. Nothing else mattered. She jabbed at his face, forced a flinch, drove a knee into his ribs and missed. Before her very eyes, her beloved brother's body shrank back down to its former age in a haze of steam. His flowing robes pooled around him once more, forcing him to reach for their clasp with a snarl and tighten them round his waist anew. Still, the damage was done. He fell to his knees, fingers biting into the ground. A fist slammed down, cratered the soil. Damn it, something wild flashed in his eyes, hot and angry, a raging flame. Barely 5 minutes in a fight that's next to useless. "I'm so sorry." Malenia felt it was her turn to apologize. She'd never see him this angry. "I didn't mean to." He shook his head. "It's not your fault. Better I know my limits now than later." "How do you feel?" "Fine." Malenia pursed her lips. She wasn't blind to the sudden change in him, nor the reversion he'd just gone through. It must have something to do with his shadow. Perhaps this Kurama had empowered him for a time with a blessing of some sort, only for said blessing to wear off. But there was more to it than that. In her heart of hearts, Malenia knew. Her twin was keeping secrets from her again. It should have stung. Once upon a time it had. Now it was merely an old ache in her heart. Surely he would tell her when the time was right. Wouldn't he? Unbidden, she found her right arm reaching towards him. "Miquella, I must ask." Marvelous, she jolted as a familiar and all too boisterous voice boomed their way. "Tiwa's nobly fought, indeed." She craned her neck back to find Radahn loping their way, long legs quickly carrying him towards them. Ranni was only a few paces behind, with a sullen bay bringing up the rear. Her brow furrowed at the sight of her half-sister in her shadow. Whatever did they want this time? Could they not let them have a moment alone? The largest of the trio waved their way. I see thee have thy shadows at last. They look rather strange. Kurama scoffed. This from the giant. Priscilla hissed furiously at him. Don't be rude. Although far from being offended, Radahn took the remark in stride. He speaks, you and I are going to get along famously. Are they truly shadows? Ranni's low voice drew a blazing glare her way. They look more human than beast. Malenia lifted her chin, meeting the older girl's glower with her own. The greater will made an exception. Ranni quirked a fiery brow. Did it now? Perhaps a test is in order. Peace, sister. Radahn laid a hand on their shoulders. You as well, Blade. That is not why we are here. Pray tell, haste any of thou seen Rykard? The Queller rolled upright in the background. That slimy snake? No, why? Blade gave him an odd look. He's missing. Her twin shrugged. Shame, that. Miquella. What? Ranni, he's a jerk. Why should I care where he went? Be that as it may, Radahn chided, he is your. Do not be so cruel to him. Miquella huffed. He's cruel to me. I understand your anger. The larger boy sighed, looked away, ran a hand through his reed mane, and finally comported himself. Rykard didn't take kindly to what father did. None of this did. To him, you and Malenia are a sign of father's faithlessness, proof that he abandoned our mother in her time of need. If you would but get to know him, you would understand. Malenia scoffed. And you? Pa, a giant hand clapped him on the back, blasting the air from his lungs. I always wanted a little brother and sister. Do let us know if you find him, won't you? His eyes met theirs. The things I let you talk me and Toffine. I'll keep an eye out. Happy. Yes, why was he being so stubborn about this? Ranni stepped out from behind Blade and laid a hand on his arm. That is all we ask. Malenia felt her boil, rot singing in her veins. She dared no. She wouldn't rise to the bait. Wouldn't give her the satisfaction she sought. To do so here and now would be to admit her loss. She refused to do such. She had never known defeat, and she never would if she had anything to say about it. If that wicked little witch, though she could steal her twin away, she had another thing coming. Come, brother. She tugged at his arms, but found herself unable to budge him. For perhaps the first time in her life. We have work to do. Miquella consented and let her tug him away, waving over one shoulder. See you tomorrow, Ranni. Be sure and bring more books. You as well, Miquella. The older girl returned his gesture. It made her heart hut. Why didn't he look at her like that? It wasn't fair. They walked in silence for a time, just them and their shadows following at a distance. Finally, she could take it no more. You shouldn't look at Ranni. Why not? She's been nice. Dunno about Blade, he doesn't really talk to me, but... Nice, she hissed back, cutting him off. She's the enemy. She steals you away at odd hours, then you come back exhausted. Ranni promised to help me find a cure. His brow furrowed. For you. What's gotten into you, Mal? She tore her arm from his and glared down at him. What's wrong with thee? Nothing. I just don't see why you're getting so worked up over this. Of course you don't. A bitter bite of laughter left her lips. For all your vaunted knowledge, you never see what's in front of thee. I'm the only one you need to look at. Only you. Fire and damnation. Those awful words caught up to Malenia a heartbeat later, and she realized what she'd said, the way she'd phrased it. She didn't know what had come over her. A slow heat crept into her face, burning brighter than the rot in her body. Miquella was still looking at her, his eyes impossibly wide. What would he say? What would he do? Would he reject her, deny her? She could bear the thought. Her body trembled. No, wait, I didn't mean. There was only recourse for, shameful though it was. Malenia fled. Rykard woke slowly. Where was he? Why couldn't he move? Why was it so dark? Was he strapped down to a table? No, not a table, he realized, feeling the coldness of slate beneath his limbs. A stone slab. Terror dawned. Golden eyes flashed as he strained against his restraints, to no avail. Those ghastly heavy shackles coiled round his limbs and throat, they tightened even as he struggled. It's no use. A voice called to him in the gloom. Struggling will only make it worse. Rykard craned his neck as best he could. He glimpsed red eyes in the gloom, heard the footsteps. It must be him, that boy's blasted shadow. He'd heard tell that Miquella would be getting one, soon. He did this, didn't he? Rykard tried, dragged himself upright, failed, and collapsed against the table anew. He sent you to torment me. The little coward can't fight, so he sends his own shadow to ambush me in the dead of night. A candle sprang to life in the cell, bathing the world in flickering fire. No, no, no. Kurama shook his head, shadows dancing off his whiskered visage. He doesn't know anything about any off-thighs. He waved a hand, indicating the hideous tools hanging on the wall. As for me, clawed fingers closed around their face, squeezed, cracks scrawled across his face. I struck a bargain. Steam bled from his visage. Rykard writhed in his grasp, to no avail. Panic bleated in his heart. Help someone, anyone. No one will hear you scream. We're far beneath the capital, little snake. He screamed anew. I see you, Rykard. The boy, how awesome. Taboy leaned in, bringing his mere face inches from his own. I know what you'll become in a few years' time. Tell me, do you know what they call a god who does not know worship? His voice warped as he spoke, shadow twisting as he looked on aghast, writhing into something monstrous. A god who does not know love, all the while his body grew. Nor mercy, it was becoming something else, impossibly large, gaining mass and fangs and claws, and 9 towering tails. Nor kindness. A lone tear rolled out Rykard's eye as death loomed over the boy. Wait, whatever I did, I'm sorry. His cry came too late. Giant jaws clamped down on him. Food. Why do you look so smug? Kurama really did, like the cat that caught the mouse and butchered its entire family. What can I say? Lounged with both hands behind his head atop a pile of pillows. The cheeky foxter Nedblon made a grand show of licking his lips. I had a good meal. Naruto raised his head, frowning a little as he rolled over in bed. You mean breakfast? Sure. His comrade's smile didn't waver. Let's go with that. He knew that look. He'd seen it a time or two during their first life. Kurama was shit at keeping secrets, but here it was almost as if he were trying to say something without saying it. Why still, he wasn't radiating any negativity, so surely whatever he was on about, it wasn't a threat to him. Still damn strange seeing him smirk like that while wearing his former face. Surely it was nothing to concern himself with. Okay, he settled for a shrug instead. Whatever you're up to, keep me out of it. Rest assured, you and Malenia have nothing to fear from me. There he went, being all cryptic again. Speaking of, how is your sister? A pillow whistled across the room to smack Kurama in the face. He tugged it down and grinned at him. That bad? Hey. Yes, Naruto sank back into his cot with a groan and clapped both hands over his eyes. She ran off yesterday, and I haven't seen her since. Wasn't in our room when I woke up this morning, either. Priscilla's nowhere to be found at that, so I can't even ask her. Kurama pinched the bridge of his nose. You made her angry, didn't you? Maybe he shrugged helplessly, not quite understanding. Dunno, never had a sister before, you know. This shit's confusing. I've been playing it by ear. His old friend hopped upright, face gone pensive. Tell me exactly what you said and what she did. Naruto complied happily. No detail was spared. The very moment he was through, Kurama slapped his forehead. Just as dense in this life as the last, I see. Why am I not surprised, you idiot? Incredulity flashed through him. He felt his pale visage burn a bright, indignant red. Hey, what did I do? She's jealous. A finger flicked his forehead. Very jealous indeed. Enough to bolt when you called her out on it, which you shouldn't have. Wait, where are you going? Where do you think? Naruto flounced out of bed, grabbed his daggers, and made for the door. I made a mistake. Gotta make it right. And I'm fine with that, but Kurama bounded up after him. You still haven't answered my question. Where are we headed? Somewhere he'd really rather not go. But what choice did he have? Follow me. Melenia America looked away from her mirror, comb in hair. I have not seen her. Why do you ask, Miquella? Naruto bit back a sigh. It might have upset her. Might, he says. His second mother tutted, patting her knee. Well, what are you waiting for? Come up here. Your shadow can wait outside. He flicked a desperate look Kurama's way, just in time to catch his other half slipping out the archway. Red eyes winked his way as he flashed him a thumbs up, then he was gone, easing the door shut behind him. A rueful smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Traitor. Marika coughed pointedly. He flushed. Must I? His mother patted her leg with intent. Somehow he had the feeling she wouldn't be saying anything until he complied. Honestly, this woman could have given Kushina herself a run for her money or worse. The two of them would have gotten along like peas in a pod, probably. And now I just imagined her meeting Marika. Nope, bad thoughts out of my head. With a long-suffering sigh he hopped into her lap. Soon enough she set that brush to his hair. Dear Miquella, for all your wit, you do not understand the mind of a woman. The Eternal Queen hummed into his ear as she went to work. If your sister does not wish to be found, then she shall not be found. She will come to you when she is ready. Which was precisely the problem. He tried to look her way, only to wince when her brush caught a snarl in his hair. But she might be in danger. From whom a golden brow rose. Herself or perhaps you. His own furrowed. I would never hurt her. Yet you already have. She swatted him on the nose with her brush. Else you would not have come to me. Come now, your father is pants at such things. Her fingers tweaked his ear lightly, drawing a complaint from his lips. Don't sulk. It'll give you wrinkles. Honestly, the two of you give me more grief than Godwin. Boom. At length, she exhaled softly. Very well. You were born with a bond, were you not? At his nod, she patted his head. I shall make use of it to help you locate her, though I suspect she won't thank me for it. That same hand shifted, covering his eyes. He protested. Reach out. Find a light in the dark. Reluctantly, he stretched out with his sixth sense, one of the few skills he'd retained in this infuriating, flimsy form of his. Marika's magic gave him a nudge, and quite suddenly he could see. His senses joined with hers, and for a brief, wonderful moment, he saw the capital as she did. Iwasno. His tongue failed him and he couldn't find the words for it. So many lights. Were those people ruined souls? It was dizzying. Enough to drown a man. He'd never felt so much life at once. On a whim, he looked back. Marika Mom burned behind him like a beacon in the dark. No, she was more than that. She wasn't just a light. She was the sun. Motes of golden sunbeams rolled off her shoulders, and deeper within, he glimpsed the Elden Ring itself, etched into her very soul. So much power. In his world, she would have been powerful indeed. Might have given Madara himself a run for his money. Focus, now. Her voice chided, echoing in his ear. Do not lose yourself in the stream, but swim with it. Follow the current. He did as asked, narrowing his perception. One by one, the lights winked out in his mind. Soon enough he felt. There was one among them, tinged a familiar reddish pink, one that he knew to be rot. He tugged on it, felt a jolt in his grasp. His eyes snapped open. Found her. Marika smiled benevolently. And where, pray tell, is she? In the sewers, he said. She's in pain. I can feel it. His mother nudged him. Go to her, then. Malenia hid in the darkness, and as she hid, the rot within her writhed anew. Her emotions fed it, make it stronger with each passing moment. Her right arm ached. She didn't dare look at it for fear of what she might find there. Everything was so dark. She didn't know where she was anymore, nor where Priscilla had gone, none of it. Any of it. She'd run and kept running until she couldn't run anymore. Now she huddled in a darkened corner that smelled of sewage and, wrestling with the whispers in her head, cursing herself all the while. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She'd been so stupid. How could she have said such things to Miquella, to her own brother? He won't want me now. I'm rotten, tainted. I shouldn't think this way. Something touched her mind. Why not? Such is your purpose. Malenia pivoted in darkness. Who's there? Poor girl. Laughter rose in the gloom. Clung to her brother so she might never be alone. Now her world is dark, her allies scattered, her shadow silent. She whirled, seeking it. Name yourself. You know me, child. The voice was insidious, the sweetest of whispers. You may have the spark, but you lack knowledge. Understanding. Her eyes closed. This isn't real. Get out of my head. Isn't it your family abandons you, as your brother will abandon you? Your own allies will die, hating you. She gripped her head. Quiet, you're not real. If you are, this just a dream. Dream or prophecy, you know the truth. It rots your heart. Tell me, how many must die before to satisfy your vanity? How many souls will be broken before the altar of your ambition, rotted, then cast aside, all because you refused to accept your destiny? All this, knowing you failed, knowing you chose to let them perish. She hunkered down and clutched her head, refusing to open her eyes. You're not real, but I am. Her eyes snapped open of their own accord, forcing herself to look at a grimy puddle, to see her reflection staring back, and yet not her, rotten and twisted, eyeless. Old, it sneered back. Was I who chose you, child. I gifted you with glorious rot. Accept me, embrace me, or lose them all. Malenia looked away, tucked her legs into her chest, and whimpered into her knees. Miquella, please brother, I need you. Still that eerie voice tormented her. You see, yet you are blind. You hear the words, yet you do not understand them. You are given every opportunity, and yet you forsake it. For what? For him? That boy isn't even your brother. Not truly. She could feel herself falling apart. Who is she really, the rotten woman in her mind's eye, or the struggling girl who couldn't control her emotions? Against her better judgment, Malenia raised her gaze and looked at her right arm. Odd, it didn't hurt anymore. Only moments before, she'd been in utter agony. So why? She saw exactly what remained of her once proud limb. Horror broke through her resolve. She screamed, kept screaming, now, screamed. Malenia, someone shouted back. Pale hands burst through the dark, and suddenly someone was there, pulling her into his chest, holding her tight. No. In her panic, Malenia fought them, kicking and thrashing, but those slim arms only tightened around her yet further. No, let go. Her elbow arced out, and she heard the awful crack of something breaking, punctuated by a familiar cry of pain. Golden hair tickled her nose. Wait, golden. It gave her pause. She looked up and saw his face, his wide nose, horribly bent by her blow. Miquella, it's okay. His voice was a balm to her soul. I'm here. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Her lower lip trembled. Golden eyes welled up with tears. She'd hurt him again. She always hurt him. Let me see your arm, he nudged her. I'll have you right as rain in a minute. He'd come for her. Against all odds, despite her harsh words, he'd still come for her. He glowed like the sun, and the rot receded. Malenia curled into his chest and wept. I'm sorry. Morgott was a light sleeper. One had to be down here in the underground, for those who dreamed too deeply never woke again. He bore it no ill will, of course. Such was the way of things. Such was life. He was an omen, an outcast even among his own kind. He and his brother were no more welcome down here than they would be in the world above. So it was that he dozed upon his threadbare blanket, ready to move at the slightest provocations. There, a noise woke him. He heard faint footsteps approaching. For a fleeting moment he hoped it might be Mother, but no, her yearly visit would not be for some time yet. Who would dare come down here in the dead of night? A shadow fell over him. He kept still, feigning sleep. The rasp of drawn steel was his only warning. His tail lashed out, smashing his woodcutter against the nearest wall. He leaped from his threadbare cot and whirled to face his enemy. By the time he did, they'd already righted themselves. A dagger flashed through the dark, nearly taking his right eye before he swayed aside. Morgott knew the sewers well. They were his home. He'd seen every inch of them, and he knew at once this was no creature of the sewers. They were young, whomever they were, clad in black from head to toe and armed with a wicked pair of curved knives. Yes, this creature could only be one thing. Assassin. Who art thou? He swept one hand before himself, conjuring a golden dagger at his foe. Identify thyself. They scoffed and batted it aside, their voice a noxious whisper, muffled behind the mask. Death. From anyone else, such might have been considered a fool's claim, a braggart's boast. But this was no boast. The assassin loped lazily forward to meet him. All the while those eerie knives of his seemed to sap what little light lingered in the sewers. This man meant to kill him. There was no time for thought after that. He parried his cane, swatted his tail aside, and slammed a dagger into his ribs. Blossomed through the air. And so Morgott fought. He fought harder than he ever had before, fought for his very life, raging against an enemy he didn't know, a foe he couldn't comprehend. Still, fight he did. He was no base prey to be consumed in such a manner. He was son to great Godfrey, of Queen Marika herself. His was the strength of lords and gods, a scion of the golden line. And yet every strike wore him down. Each block took yet more from him, and when he tried to evade those wicked knives, he did so only by the narrowest of margins. That soon proved next to impossible, for the boy's shadow proved as slippery as he was agile. Each cut took more from him, sapped his strength. A flicker of fear flowered in Morgott's thoughts as another wound opened just below his chest. For all his strength, all his fury, he just did not have it. There soon became something of a running battle as they raged back and forth, dragging them deeper and deeper into the depths. He fought more to keep the boy away from him now than to beat him back. Yet it was all for naught. He need his brother. Mohg's voice boomed in the depths. Brother, where art thou? Come to me, I need thee. Poor boy. The masked killer tutted as he weaved between his blows, words the darkest hollow, calling for help that will never come. Your twin knows a losing fight when he sees one. A spark of rage ignited in Morgott's chest. Enough. His cane cracked down in an overhanded swipe, forcing the masked maniac back, buying himself a brief moment of respite. It was enough. Was true. He had sealed his curse away long ago, in the hopes of becoming better than he was. Something more. He'd held to the hope that Mother would one day recognize him as her trueborn son and take him from this place. He'd had hopes, dreams, ambitions. In this moment, Morgott clung to them more than ever before. He unsealed his sword with a snarl, the cane crackling away to reveal the gleaming blue black blade beneath. Foul wretch, thy kind are all of a piece, he sneered, flinging the discarded remnants away. Pillagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition, the masked man finished his sentence with a cracking roundhouse that plowed him into, then through a wall. Horns snapped, bones bent, muscle mangled. He was still tumbling when another blow rocked his world, dragging his face through a puddle of raw sewage. Shrieks echoed in his ears as the denizens of the underground fled before him. Those that didn't were mowed down by his flailing form. Move. He had to move. To lay here was as good as death. He forced himself up on trembling limbs, winced now as the faint sound of laughter echoed behind him. I've heard it all before. His tormentor tutted. Let me take a page from your book. He cast his knives aside and spread his arms wide. Put these foolish ambitions to rest. Never. Morgott lunged forward with a howl and skewered the masked madman on his blade, hoisting him high. Gravity did the rest, dragging the boy's body further down the blade. Triumph bloomed in his chest and he clung to it like a drowning man. Even then he half expected a trick of some sort, a futile, desperate attack. None came, and so he allowed himself to smile. Rejoice, little shadow. He sneered at the skewered fool. You will die, as you were meant to, forgotten and do you laugh. The masked boy chuckled, grinning as he gripped the blade currently piercing his chest and impaled himself yet further. Because you were already dead. He leered down at him, teeth gone sharp. You just haven't realized it yet. His body burst into so much scalding smoke, blinding and burning Morgott in the same instant. The Omen Prince stumbled backward, clutching his eyes, warding his cursed blade before his face. More tricks. Was there no end to this? He couldn't see him, couldn't hear anything now but the ominous rasp of dark laughter ringing through the fog. Show yourself. He squinted into the haze, blinking black spots from his vision. An ominous rasp rose in his ears. A terrible claw pierced the fog at speed, not the arm of a boy at all, but a beast, large and red and bristling with scarlet light. Foolishness. Whatever he intended, he was too far away to reach him in time. He'd surely block it. He raised his blade to do just that and slammed it against that twisted limb. Imagine his surprise when that ghastly tether bent at an impossible angle, arched under his blade, and his chest ached. Morgott looked down, quivering. 5 clawed fingers pierced his chest, just above his heart. No, within his heart. Panic bleated in his brain. Death. This was death. He tried to speak, tried to pry the hand away, and failed miserably. Nearly touching that hideous limb burned the skin from his palms and charred his own hands. He could no sooner extricate it than he could sprout wings and fly. It was buried deep. Too deep. It's nothing personal, old man. The boy, how is not a boy, tutted softly as the last of the smoke cleared, wounds mending before his very eyes. You're not worthy of this power. A hand reached up to remove his mask, exposing bright red eyes set in a whiskered face, a grinning visage framed by tawny blonde hair. But I am. A flick of his elongated arm reeled Morgott in like a fish, dragging him down to his hands and knees. And I will take what is mine. An armored boot kicked out into an arm, depriving the Omen Prince of his balance. In his beleaguered state, he was too weak to prevent it. His body failed him. He toppled to the floor, tried to rise, failed now as something landed atop his chest. Strong fingers found his throat and began to squeeze. But why, he croaked. Why go about this madness? Madness. Those eerie red eyes fluttered in a rapid blink. Is that what you think this is? I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He applied pressure, slowly but steadily choking the life out of him. I struck a bargain. Several souls to save one. You're merely the second, the next link in the chain. But you won't be the last. Realization dawned. No, yes, those slitted eyes blazed with balefire. I'll find your fool brother next, he snarled, tear out his heart, and drink his. See how his formless mother likes that. Then I'll find the frenzied flame he's guarding, and consume that, too. Fiend, I am. That twisted visage softened as the last of life slipped away. For his sake, to save the life of my dear friend, I'd gladly become the devil himself. And for my lady, he added after a moment's pause, she's shown me the future to come, and the horror that it brings. He clutched at the hands choking him, to no avail. You could have done such good, Morgott. His killer tutted once, shaking his head to and fro. You have prevented this from happening, restored order after the shattering. But you didn't, did you? Another awful realization dawned in the dark, but now there was no light to see it by. Impossible. Your kind do so love to throw that word around. Black spots crept into the corners of his vision. I saw your fate. You squatted before your precious tree, praying to a silent god that rejected you and did nothing. Such a waste. To prevent that future from becoming a reality, well. His killer tittered a little. I'm sure you understand. You lot have to die. But I am not without mercy. An impossibly large hand closed around Morgott's horned head. Die now, the shadow intoned, and know that you have failed, that all your strength, all your power, all that you are, will be used to usher in a new age. That is my gift to you. Those clawed fingers squeezed. The eternal freedom of oblivion. Morgott's mind sank down into the darkness. Dearest Miquella, so nice of you to visit. Care for some tea? No, thank you. Are you sure it's fresh? A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw. He did his best to stifle it with a smile and only partially succeeded. The result was a somewhat strained expression that left him looking rather constipated. Kurama's irritated sigh did little to assuage his own anxiety. And the smell down here, that only made matters worse. Must not kill. His ties to his half-brother Omen were tenuous at best. He knew there was something fundamentally wrong with the man before him. Still, he had his uses. His research had been useful in fending off Malenia's rot in the past. That was the only reason he yet lived. But he was just so damn creepy worse. Supposedly his brother Morgott lurked down in the underground somewhere. He didn't want to meet that one. Mohg's abode didn't do much to dissuade one of that either. The sewer chapel was a ghastly and putrid place, covered in roots from above and below. Perhaps it had been something else once upon a time. Now it was a shell of its former self, just like the Omen himself. Just another devotee to worship the fallen mother. Thinking of her made him shiver. There are enough outer gods in the lands between, and he was already at war with one of them. The last thing he needed was another. Spare me the pleasantries, Mohg. You know what I'm here for. You have it. Indeed I do. The horned abomination scuttled forward, and it was all he could do to stand his ground. Here you are. He pressed a worn yellow tome into his hands. Every bit of lost and or heretical knowledge I could accumulate on the frenzied flame, its incantations, and the like. He held it up in the dim light and considered it. Good. We'll be in touch. Leaving so soon. What do you want, Mohg? The Omen bowed, low and deep at the waist. A moment of your time, dearest Miquella, nothing more. Kurama scoffed. Naruto felt the faintest flicker of disgust stir in him. He choked it down. Calm down. Breathe. Don't rise to the bait. He had enough enemies already. Unless you know a surefire way to save Malenia, I ain't interested. Ah, but I do, dear one. The madman sounded far too giddy for his liking. The formless mother has shown me much since we last spoke. If you would but listen to her, she could show you the way to save your sister. Through Kurama's voice dripped acid. Thanks, but not thanks. Aha! Mohg rounded on him, lone eye gleaming in the dark. And so the shadow speaks a piece of advice for you, little one. You think you know much, but you know nothing. You would be wise to reconsider your current allegiances. Kurama didn't rise to the bait and offered a self-same smile in return. I know that you won't be useful to us much longer. That's more than enough for me. Naruto clicked his tongue. Kurama, no. What his old friend shrugged. It's the truth, isn't it? This again, he didn't have time for this. Even so, you can't kill him without good reason. Do you see? Mohg preened anew. My dear one values me more than you. Why, it might be you he cast aside. Here at last, Naruto's temper slipped its leash. He touched the shackle hidden in his robe, and a bolt of golden light leaped forth to catch Mohg by the throat, bringing him low. Bands of blessed chains burst forth from the floor, seizing him. Light bound him to the wall. They wouldn't last long, but they didn't need to. He strode forward, grabbed the hunched Omen by his horn, and smashed him down. Mohg gurgled wetly. I ain't your dear one. He hissed at him. Call me that again and you'll lose the other eye. Maybe it would be better to kill him now and be rid of him. Kurama spoke up before he could. Time to go. Naruto stepped back and released him. Yes, we'll seek knowledge elsewhere. Mohg laughed at their retreating backs. Be sure to write. Naruto slammed a fist into a wall and left it crumbling behind him. The things he did to save Malenia. Surely Renna was making better progress. Maybe he should check in on her. The Academy of Rhea Lucaria was home to a great many books. Too many, some might say. Naruto has thought himself ready for such, ready and willing to make use of the knowledge hidden within. More fool he. Now he found himself beginning to regret his life choices as Renna thumped another pile down on his desk. It was the third in as many hours, and they weren't even a fourth of the way through the shelves looming above. Never before had quest to cure Malenia felt more daunting than this. Lunar princess though she was, his half-sister didn't have access to nearly every tome in the academy, nor did he expect such from her, yet she'd proven herself both serious and able in her desire to aid him. But so many books. His head had the worn wood with a groan. It should not be this hard to cure one damn disease. There, Miquella. He felt a cool hand caress the back of his neck. You knew this would be difficult, and greatest deeds often require the strongest of wills. When he didn't lift his head, he heard her tut softly. Shall I send Blade to fetch some refreshments? No, let them be. He dragged himself upright, heaving a sigh. They've more than earned a break. From this angle he could clearly see Blade and Kurama chatting away in a corner, arms waving as they argued over something he couldn't hear. Probably swords. Cheeky buggers. Kurama seemed silently bemused by the half-wolf's bluntness, while Blade appeared to enjoy the chance for conversation in turn. After all they'd been through, he wasn't about to deny him the chance to make a friend. Randy plonked down beside him, shoulder brushing against his. The faint scent of cinnamon and dusty books accompanied her. To work, then. Fine, fine. Naruto tossed his head, stifled a yawn with one hand, and considered his research anew. The fruits of his latest labor lay sprawled across his desk, tomes as myriad and ranging in subject matter as the stars themselves. His current choice, a worn yellow tome with fraying pages, presented another possible path, a solution to rid Malenia of the rot in her veins once and for all. Unfortunately, that solution came with caveats. The frenzied flame burns away all. He licked his finger and used it to turn another page, tracing over the illustration of a man clutching a fire to their chest. The idea of burning sounds useful, but well, where would we even begin? It's not a matter of beginning, but ending. Randy reached over his shoulder and pointed to another paragraph, and with it, an illustration below the one he'd outlined. See here, where once the drawn man had grasped the flame, now he clutched at his eyes, back arching in pain, lips parted within a silent, soundless scream. 'Tis all well and good if the flame sears away sickness as well as rot, but this passage here. He followed her gaze, frowned now, when he saw what her pale finger indicated. Yeah, I see it. That's a problem. What was the point in curing one disease, only to inflict her with another? No, this madness was not the way. With one hand he swept the book aside to be shelved again at a later date. The other scratched out another line of a piece of parchment nearby, crossing out the words frenzied flame in bold ink. It was one of many such scratches across multiple methods. They'd been at this for some time now. He suspected they'd keep it until the sun set, or America called them back to the capital. Whichever came first. Things had settled down over the past few weeks. Malenia's episode had only strengthened her resolve and made her all the more determined to become stronger, so that she might never drag him down in such a way ever again. To that end, America Mother had found her a proper mentor, one who promptly set to teaching his twin ways of the sword. He'd seen her training from afar once and didn't envy her it. Malenia had a harsh taskmaster. If she survived, she'd become something spectacular. All the more reason to find a cure for her, and soon. Before he ran out of time, Blade said something that made Kurama bark a laugh, drawing him from his maudlin thoughts. Randy laid one hand against her cheek, a faint smile touching her pale face. "T would seem our shadows get along." He gave her a nudge. "As do we," she sputtered, pale face gone red as she looked away. "We are Imperion, you and I, such is expected of us. If this is a marriage proposal," he smirked, "I'm afraid I'll have to decline. We're both kinda young." Randy flung a book at him. "Do not jest about such things." He ducked it nimbly. Stubborn girl. Randy really was too proud to admit that they got on well with one another. "Would it kill you to say you enjoy my company?" She elbowed him for it, jabbing him in the ribs. "Yes." Naruto couldn't quite hide his grin. "Must be my boyish charm," he coughed as she drove another elbow into his side, rendering his words a raspy laugh. "Geez, you can be aggressive. You'll never find yourself a proper partner at this rate." "Oh, a joke, I was joking, Randy, not the hair I give." With those words she stopped grinding her knuckles against his skull. Wow, her face really was red. She leaned with a huff, gave him a baleful look, and took a moment to comport herself before she dared to speak again. "There is another course we haven't charted." He didn't like the sound of that. "And what would that be?" "My mother has an amber egg gifted to her by father." She closed a book and leaned over it, clutching the leather-bound hide her chest. "It contains a piece of the Elden Ring, that is to say, a greater rune. It is only one of two in existence, the other being destined death, guarded by Maliketh himself. Ain't that Marika's shadow?" "Isn't." Randy flicked his forehead to correct him. "Use proper words." "But yes, rumor has it he resides in the beast's sanctum north of Kaled." Kurama met his gaze over her shoulder and quirked a brow. Naruto gave him a shallow nod. They'd remember that tidbit. Was it possible to kill the rot with Malenia without harming her semantics? He supposed. He'd have to track him down. "Forgive me," she palmed her face with a sigh, sweeping stray strands of scarlet out her eyes. "I'm rambling, aren't I? What I'm saying is, it might be possible to rebirth your sister. Such would require a larval tear, of course, but well." As he looked on, she reached into her robes and withdrew a small blue pouch bound with golden string. "I have several handy. You might even be able to rid yourself of your ailment." Shame pooled in the pit of his stomach. He hated the bitter taste of it. "You do realize I can push this curse back for at least a few minutes a day?" "I am aware, and that is only with your shadow thusly empowering you." Bright blue eyes met his gold. "Do you not wish to be whole?" He considered it. Maybe I should ask her. No, the suddenness of Randy's exclamation startled him as much as it did Ranny. "No," she repeated, softly now. "Mother is not in sound mind at present. She hasn't been for quite some time, and Rykard's absence has only made her more unhinged. She has confined herself to her chambers hence, but if you were to enter, you, who are the spitting image of Marika and Radahn combined." "Yeah," he grimaced. "I can see how that wouldn't end well." "No, it would not," Ranny hissed at him. "And more fool you for thinking of it. I shall speak to her on the morrow and see if anything can come of it. Don't go near her. You may be a demigod, but you're no match for her in your current state. If she sees you," a glimpse of something dark flashed across her face, "I fear she may try to kill you." Naruto shrugged. "Then I won't go into her chambers. I demand a promise." She shoved her face against his. "Swear to me, say you won't go anywhere near her." He raised a hand. "Cross my heart and hope to die." After a moment, the princess finally relented. That will suffice. Kurama scoffed through their mental link. I could take Renna. Naruto's met his partner's gaze across the room and scowled his way. Don't even think about it. Fine. Worst comes to worst, I'll just snatch the egg off the old biddy and run for it. Happy no. Something nagged at Naruto. It felt suspiciously like guilt. He wasn't sure why. Speaking of family, has there been any word on Rykard? None. Here at last, Ronnie looked away, good mood dashed on the harsh cliffs of reality. It's as if he simply fell off the face of the earth. Father remains unconcerned, but mother is heartbroken. Naruto could sympathize. He didn't like Rykard, but prick or no, he was still Ranny's brother even if they hadn't parted on the best of terms. I'm sure you'll find him. I do not think we will. She granted him a small, sad smile. It's been nearly a month now, and still no sign of him. That was putting it mildly. Radahn was beside himself with worry. Landell was still being searched high and low even now, but nothing had come of it. Rykard had all but vanished into the winds. Worse, he wasn't sure why. Demigods were powerful to be sure, but he couldn't imagine why Ranny's brother would just strike out on his own like that. Assuming he had in the first place. The Golden Order has its fair share of enemies. Kurama's voice was a death knell to his hopes. I wouldn't be surprised if someone spirited him away. Best not to tell Ranny that. Might break her heart. I'm sure he'll turn up sooner or later. What else do we have? Here. His half-sibling thumped a heavy tome down before him, happy for the distraction. Have a look at this. Naruto considered the worn cover for a moment, and its title besides. Myths and Legends. Not just that, silly. She opened the tome and turned to a marked page. Look here. It is said that a blind swordsman once sealed the essence of an outer god in a lake far below Liurnia. Her eyes met his again. A god of rot. Likely the same that afflicted Malenia. His left ear twitched. Is that so Malenia's new tutor is blind, ain't he? Is he? Ranny titled her head. I suppose it's possible. They could be one and the same. 'Tis unlikely, though. Unlikely doesn't mean impossible. Ranny favored him with a wry grin. You're learning. On to the next. She wrestled another book to the center of the desk. Perhaps the idea of catalysts might at least forestall Malenia's rot. Naruto squinted at the words as much as the diagrams within. I don't know these spells. Fear not, his fellow Imperion preened. I shall teach you them. He warmed to Ranny's words and listened intently to her lesson. And as he listened, an idea was born. While he could pacify the rot in Malenia, doing so drained his strength, and that blessing needed to be applied daily. It wasn't a sustainable course of action. Even with Kurama boosting him, sooner or later he'd reach his limit. And what then? He knew the answer. Without him to beat it back, the rot would consume Malenia. It would take her arm, then her legs, even her eyes. Eventually, it would have her very soul. Unacceptable. He wouldn't let that come to pass. Not while he could still restrain the rot. But if there was a way to bind that blessing to something, make it self-sustaining with an item perhaps, then give that item to Malenia. Would that work? It would have to something that couldn't be removed easily. No, not a necklace. Maybe a ring? No, that would be removed, too. An earring? No. Blast it. He needed something that would bind the blessing to her, use her own strength to feed it. Couldn't be large either, something small, something that wouldn't cause her pain. It wouldn't be a cure he knew, but a stopgap. Even so, Kurama looked over, sensing his excitement. Ranny noticed it next. Niquella, SHH. He held up a hand. I'm thinking. His mind was already racing. He would need something strong. Something that wouldn't break easily, if at all. Something imbued with strength and vitality that Malenia wouldn't be able to lose. For it to work, it would have been embedded in her body, but he couldn't go stabbing her with a sword, or even a dagger. No, it'd be something slender, something to draw the rot away from her body, contain it, and purify it. What was smaller than a dagger? Something small and slender, so tiny as to barely bother her at all. An epiphany dawned. He shot to his feet. A needle. Ranny jolted, startled by the suddenness of his outburst. What? A needle? He repeated, rounding on her. Do we have any needles around here? Needles? For the first time, his half-sister faltered and yielded to his whims, her fair face turning a pale shade of red beneath his blazing glare. Well, I have some in my sewing room. He grabbed her by the hands. Bring me as many as you can. Ranny sputtered. It will blade do as he says. Her shadow nodded and lopped away. Kurama went with him, and in a matter of moments, they were alone once more. Naruto sank back into his seat, winded. Sorry about that. I'm not even sure if this'll work, but I have to try. Ranny plunked down beside him. She still hadn't released his hands. 'Tis rare to see you this excited. Did you have an idea? Yeah. He wiped a bit of sweat from his brow, idly cursing his body for its weakness. He just felt so frail these days without Kurama boosting him. It's gonna be complicated, but it just might work. Ranny sighed into the silence that followed. You truly would do anything for your sister, wouldn't you? She's family. Of course I would. He pivoted to look at her. I'd do the same for you, you know. Randy's face burned to match her scarlet locks. Hold thy silver tongue, I shall not be swayed so easily. You're looking pretty swayed to me. She thumped him over the head with a book. Didn't hurt, only made him laugh. Of course that had her throwing another book his way, which only had him laughing all the harder. Say what you would about Ranny, but she just couldn't be honest with herself sometimes. He liked it about it. Not only did it make her easy to tease, but he found he enjoyed her company these days. Radahn was nice and all, but his knowledge of spells tended toward gravity and little else. He wasn't inclined to learn the way they did, to ask why. Another book bonked him on the head. Don't ignore me, Miquella. Naruto grinned as he fended her off. Wouldn't dream of it. He wouldn't trade moments like these for the world. Unfortunately, the faint sound of rapidly approaching footsteps drew their ear before he could make a meal of her tantrum. They return already. Renna craned her neck back, glancing toward where they'd last seen Blade and Kurama. Someone hurtled around the corner. Nope, not them. Definitely not them. Wasn't them. A cry, sudden and sharp. He had no time to dodge. Brother. Renna let him go with a huff. Melenia was on him a heartbeat later, all but crashing into him. Hey, he caught her balking a little as nuzzled him. Wait, I thought you were back in Landell. I was, but Mother sent me to fetch you and Renna. She drew back, holding him at arm's length, pale face pensive. She wants all of us back in the capital immediately. Idly he saw Priscilla behind her, leading a baffled Blade and Kurama, each of whom carried several small boxes, doubtlessly the needles he'd asked after. This is important. Malenia yanked on his sleeve, snapping out of his musings. She's not all right. There's been an incident. Deaths. She elaborated when he and Renna exchanged a baffled look. We must return. No. Confusion bloomed in his heart. Wait, that's why she upset. Who died? Someone dear to us. Radahn stepped through the arch from which Malenia had just come, his jovial face carved from stone. Come, this is not the place for this. I will do no such thing. Renna stood her ground. Not until you tell what the devil's going on. Radahn and Malenia exchanged a miserable glance. Naruto saw something pass between them, some shared understanding. He wasn't going to like this, was he? Mother plans to hold a funeral. Malenia's voice wavered only a little. They found Rykard's body in the sewers beneath the capital and what was left of Morgott. Renna choked on the very air she breathed. Body. Radahn grimaced. Yes, I'm sorry, sister. An awful silence filled the library. And then Renna, proud, stubborn, strong Renna, made a pitiful noise caught somewhere between a sob and a wail as she all but fell to her knees. Naruto caught her with one arm and found himself dragged down for his efforts as his half-sister latched on for dear life, held tight now, burying her head into his shoulder, heedless of Malenia's presence. For once his twin didn't protest. She sat down beside them, tucked herself into his free side, and held them both. Radahn stooped down on a large knee and wrapped his arms round the three of them. Naruto couldn't bring himself to enjoy the warmth. No, his mind was already churning, trying to ponder everything out, and for once, failing spectacularly. In the end, he came to a singular conclusion, flawed though it was. There was a murderer loose in Landell. But who could possibly kill demigods? This was the last thing they needed. Didn't they have enough problems? How little he knew. How very little indeed. Their troubles had only just begun. His nephew had come to visit. Truly, it came as something of a surprise to Maliketh, if only because that made 2 visits to his domain in as many days. Now, he'd not had this many visitors since he'd come to this land. Not since he'd first sequestered himself here, away from America, away from the capital, away from all of it. The gargoyles warded off all who would dare approach. Still, here the boy was. He found it a pleasant change. He had his eyes and ears in the capital. Even after all these years, he knew young Miquella was the inquisitive sort, but he hadn't thought the boy would go so far as to seek him out here, of all places. There was a reason he'd chosen to hide himself away in the beast's sanctum, after all. Not just at Marika's request, but because few could make their way here unharmed in the first place. The hidden paths were not known to many, and those who did had long since been sworn to silence. Yet somehow the boy found him. How he'd wriggled his way in was anyone's guess. Still, he was glad for the company. This was a lonely duty after all. To guard destined death was no easy task. Which in turn begged the question, one that had been gnawing at the old wolf for the last minute. Why are you here, little Miquella? The boy grinned and plonked down beside him, tucking his little knees into his chest. Wanted to ask you something. Oh, he had an inkling as to what. Best not to reveal his hand just yet. And what might that be? Pale eyes met his. Can gods die? Aha, just as he'd thought. You're here about Rykard and Morgott, then. A bob of his head. The funeral's today. Took a week to get things ready. Maliketh grunted. He couldn't find the right words to say, not in the face of such sorrow. They should not have died. He wasn't sure how they had. Destined death was safe with him, sealed within his blade as always, and as it always would be. Hardy and whole. No fragments were missing, he would have known if they were. You're coming, by the way. Am I? Now he rasped a laugh. Marika would never allow him within 3 feet of her, but he appreciated the sentiment. Surely that's not the only reason you came by to visit this old wolf. Miquella looked down. I want to see if I can kill the rotten Melenia, without killing her. And now they came to the crux of the matter. Maliketh fell silent for a long moment, marshalling the tattered threads of his thoughts. He knew the unspoken request for what it was. Miquella's concern for his twin was well known. He had been thorough in his last report. The boy had researched everything he could, desperate to find a cure. He was close to a breakthrough certainly, but such determination had oft proven the ruin of minds greater than he. If he faltered, Golden Order might well have a monster on its hands. At length, the old wolf sighed and levered himself upright. Your shadow speaks well of you. You would do anything for your sister. His tone was soft, almost contemplative. just as I would do anything for America. And he would, even if it meant isolating himself, here, at the edge of the world. The cursed boy looked up at him silently, pleading, "Very well." Reaching behind his back, Maliketh drew forth his black blade in all its flawless glory. A flick of his wrist sheathed it halfway in the floor of the beast's sanctum, exposing a moty of glimmering darkness, a void that drank in all light, its shimmering surface so clean one could glimpse their own reflection in its polished edge. "I shall allow thee to look upon destined death, young Miquella." He held it there, gripping the hilt in hand. "Though I know not what you can gain from seeing such a thing. If you go mad, I shall slay you." Miquella leaned in, eyes wide, gazing upon his reflection within. "Thanks." He ran his hands over the perfect blade. "This means more to me than you know, Uncle." Uncle Maliketh blinked once at that. Uncle. The word ignited an odd feeling in Maliketh's chest. It was not an unpleasant feeling. Perhaps it would not be so bad then, to have a visitor every one in a while. "It has been a long while since someone called me that." Miquella wasn't listening. Or perhaps he was, but he simply chose not to respond. He'd long since laid his head against destined death and closed his eyes, the better to commune with into the black blade. Naruto opened his eyes to the deepest of darkness. Maliketh was gone, and the beast's sanctum with him. Only his spirit remained in the void. No, that wasn't quite right. He blinked and reality unspooled around him. He could see stars in the dark, pinpricks of distant light stretching across a greater galaxy. The very cosmos itself unfolded before his eyes. It was beauty. It was grace. It was order, cause and effect, life and death itself, yet also more somehow, not unfettered by banal things such as mortality and a desire for power, influence, strength. Realization struck him a moment later, and with it, dread. He dug too deep, reached too far. Destined death was a shard of the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring was connected to the Elden Beast, and the Elden Beast was the vassal of. An awful burning presence brushed against his mind, fingers like ice locking around his psyche. A sonorous voice rattled the void around him. "Who seeks destined death? The greater will, not through the two fingers, not through America or any of that." He'd unwittingly and accidentally opened a direct channel to the outer god in its entirety. He couldn't even see it properly. It existed as a glowing, shapeless light in his vision, formless and yet holding every form he could possibly conceive. "I ask again, who seeks destined death?" Yet for all that, it didn't seem omniscient, nor did it know his true thoughts. "I do." He grit his teeth. The plan had changed. He'd have to adjust accordingly. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki." The Great Will interjected curtly, shattering his words. Light flashed and his spirit shifted, regaining its former shape. Once a Shinobin reincarnated as Miquella, son of Marika, demigod, cursed, child of the vessel. "You are known. Your purpose is not. What is your purpose here?" If Kurama had been here beside him, he would have kicked him right about now. The Greater Will might not know about his partner, but it clearly knew who he was, or did it simply not care? "Screw it. Nothing to lose now. I've come to bargain." A pause. The light dimmed. This time, its question was tinged with confusion. "What is your purpose here?" "I'm here to offer a trade." He held up a pale arm, willing himself not to flinch in the face of such divine scrutiny. "You're a god. You know things." He felt a flicker of indignation from what passed for the Greater Will. "Nothing is beyond our reach." "Arrogance. I can use that." He pounced on it with a grin. "Then you can cure Melenia." "Perhaps." Awfully evasive answer, coming from a self-proclaimed god. Pain spiked through his head, drawing a snarl from him. He grit his teeth against it with a grin and barreled on. "You can't do it, can you?" The silence was answer enough. "Aren't you supposed to be all-powerful? She is afflicted by our sister, just as you have been cursed by our brother. Such hexes are not so easily undone." Despair crashed down on him in a terrible wave. His hopes threatened to drown with it. If even a god couldn't purify Malenius from the scarlet rot, then why was he wasting his time here? For a moment he'd thought this would be easy, that he'd accidentally found a way out of this hell for him and his sister. It was not to be. He turned on one heel. "In that case, I rescind my offer. We have nothing more to discuss. I'll be leaving now." "Wait." He paused, looked over his shoulder. Beneath his gaze the light swayed, almost as if it were flustered. "We said such cannot be easily undone. Never did we deem it impossible. We would hear your bargain." He made his offer. The Greater Will listen to him. Furious, it said at last, "You would trade so much for her sake." Naruto set his jaw, refusing to reveal his intentions any more than he already had. "More than you know. We shall make you a counteroffer." The light swarmed in, pushing so close he found himself squinting against it. "Your mother seeks to supplant us. We are not blind to her schemes, nor the rebellion she prepares. When the time comes, when her treachery is revealed, you will supplant her and take the Elden Ring unto yourself. Do this, swear yourself to us, and we shall aid you, both in saving your sister and yourself." The very air shook with the weight of their words. "What say you?" Ice lodged in his throat. "You're asking me to turn on my family. My mother. She will turn on you first." He frowned. "She won't do that." "Yes, she will. We have foreseen it. I won't kill her. We did not ask such. When she turns, her punishment shall be more severe. I'll believe it when I see it. What's in it for me besides curing Melenia?" Before his eyes, the Greater Will's light dimmed, shrank, resolved itself into proper form as he looked on. Substance, shape. In place of that once burning radiance searing the cosmos, he found himself face to face with a shapely young woman wrapped in a tight shift. lone blue eyes dark enough to nearly be black gazed back at him beneath long lashes, framed by long flowing midnight tresses veined with the golden stars of the very cosmos. As if her hair were cut from the sky itself, she looked ageless, eternal, not a day over 20 at worst. Her little smile, however, held the eternity of eons gone by. There was an ageless grace to it, yet also an unsettling hunger lurking within, a desire for power and influence he found himself shying away from. She clasped both hands behind herself and leaned forward. It did fascinating things to her bosom. We offer ourselves. Naruto's throat went dry. Come again. You would be our god consort, your curse broken at the moment of your ascension. The Greater Will's avatar barreled on, heedless of his discomfort. All of the lands between would be ours to shape as we please, our descendants more numerous than the very stars themselves. Tempting. She was offering him an easy way out. Are you not satisfied? Though her voice lacked its earlier timbre, carrying only the faintest of echoes, he found it attractive still. We chose a terminal for ourselves so that we might better communicate with you, one we believed your current form would find pleasing. A coy smile flitted across her cherubic face. Shall we change it? Perhaps she cupped her chest, considering her bosom with a detached air. Would you prefer someone better endowed? Stop. Naruto flung up a hand, cutting her off. I get the picture. Why offer me this? Because we wish to win. Rage flashed across the Greater Will's face as eyes gleamed with flecks of gold, a rare fracture slipping through her facade. The lands between are ours, yet we find ourselves set upon by all sides by our kin. Her fists set at her sides, spitting sparks as she raged on. They shall not have it, no, nay, never. We will not abandon what is ours. Those keen orbs narrowed upon him to pin him in place. We will have your answer now. Choose wisely. This is not an offer we shall make again. Damned if he did, damned if he didn't. I accept. Triumph blazed across her face. But only if you treat me as an equal. Equal. A blink. 2, now, followed by 3 as she tilted her head. What is the meaning of this word? Seriously, he palmed his face. You're kidding, right? You don't know what it means. We thought they went without saying. Arrogant little snot. More and more, he got the feeling the Greater Will really wasn't so great at all. Perhaps she was simply lesser than her siblings, like a young child trying to cling onto a toy that everyone else wanted. He might have found it funny if the lands between and all the lives within didn't happen to be said toy. He told her. She squinted at him. Curious. We see not the harm in it. However, the Greater Will was silent for a long moment. Then she whirled. Firm hands grasped him by the shoulders. Warm lips pressed against his. The bargain is struck. She pulled away with a smile, leaving him dumbstruck. The pact sealed. Knowest now the truth I seeketh. 2 fingers touched Naruto's forehead. Light swarmed in, and he saw. Maliketh watched Miquella for a sign. Watched, as seconds ticked on into minutes, then an hour now. He almost pitied the boy. To stare into destined death was to gaze into the abyss itself. But when one gazed long into the abyss often gazed long into them in return. It promised knowledge and power, but at a price. Many a brave fool had gone mad under doing so. Such was the true nature of death. One could not simply remove it from the equation, as it were, though America had made a fine attempt. Death was a concept, a constant, a pillar upon which the lands between stood. It was fair to all, mortal or god. All died equally. Even the Golden Order would not last forever. Miquella leaned back and chuckled suddenly, eyes half-lidded. I see. So that's how it is. How did I miss this? It's all so simple. He hid another laugh behind his palm, shoulders shaking as he clambered to his feet. Mirth spilled out of him. He tilted his head back and grinned at the full moon. Maliketh watched him keenly, wary for the telltale signs of insanity that often followed when looking up destined death. Such were often instant, but the boy seemed sane for now. No more laughter followed beyond that first faint giggle. The silence that followed was eerie. Do you still have your wits about you? He tightened his grip upon the black blade. Or have you gone mad? I don't feel mad. Miquella craned his neck, producing an awful crack. I just understood something that I didn't before. Thanks for this. He clasped both hands together and bowed his head, bending deep at the waist to better convey his appreciation. You've given me an idea. I just don't know if I have the strength to do it, yet. Mournful eyes met his. Will you help me? No one had ever asked him for help before. It humbled Maliketh more than words. If that is your wish, I suppose I could let you linger a little longer. Miquella granted him a small, sad smile in return. Sorry, we have a funeral to attend. The funeral was a miserable thing indeed. Naruto saw no need to sugarcoat it, nor did he particularly desire to. It was a bitter affair that took place in the late afternoon. Dark clouds loomed large overhead in an equally overcast sky, ready to burst at the slightest provocations. He suspected it would rain any moment now. Beneath the Erdtree's light, assembled before the thrones, they watched the ceremony grind on and on seemingly without end. Censers paraded about with their staves and incense, bringing with it an awful acrid smell he couldn't stand. Smoke swirled through the air, thick and clawing to fall upon 2 black coffins holding the remains of the fallen Rykard and Morgott, each sealed shut by powerful spells. There wasn't enough of them to have an open casket ceremony. He'd seen their remains, a solemn reminder of just how truly fleeting life could be. Death was supposed to be an impossibility for the demigods, yet here they lay, 2 of their number slain, the rest of them dressed in black to mourn their passing. Renna had been silent as the grave since they'd come back, and he couldn't much blame her. This was her brother. Even Radahn was uncharacteristically quiet. And Renna, he didn't look at the weeping woman. He absolutely did not dare. Malenia grabbed his hand and nestled a little closer to him. Her actions drew a sharp look from Radahn. Naruto glared back into their father looked away, which in turn gave him a chance to consider the coffin anew. He hadn't been friends with Rykard. Honestly, he hated him. Even so, he hadn't wished for his death. Morgott, that was a shame. No one should lose a brother. Not even a twisted creature like Mohg. Oi, Kurama tugged at his arm. We need to have a talk. Naruto shook him off, not looking back. Not now. His partner subsided with a sigh. Mom was the most solemn of them all. Grave in her gown, a black veil of mourning drawn low across her regal visage. She approached the coffins slowly. Each step seemed to take an eternity. When she finally reached them, she almost seemed to sag before their eyes. Pausing between them, she laid a hand on each coffin, fingers tracing the black lacquer. She seemed so miserable in this moment. He couldn't even imagine the idea of her turning against them. None dared approach her for fear of inciting her wrath, not even Maliketh. He could sense the old wolf lurking only feet behind the back, shunned by the others. He still didn't understand why they feared him. Melenia didn't. Neither did he. Yet none came near them. Why? We gather here today to mourn. Narika's voice rang out among them, clear as a clarion bell. 2 lives cut short, silenced, before their time. We shall find the one who did this, and we shall end him. But first we must bid farewell. Renna went first. One by one, each stepped forward to lay hands upon the coffins. Some laid flowers, others, small tokens he didn't recognize. Naruto lingered at the end with Melenia approaching last. Rykard's coffin was cold under his hand. Morgott's, more so. He couldn't bring himself to say anything to either. Neither did Melenia. The deed done, Marika raised a hand. Now we consign them to the depths. Her hand waved anew, laying a wreath upon Morgott's coffin. May their spirits slumber peacefully, nestled against the roots of the Erd tree. The very earth trembled underfoot. Naruto shrank back. Roots rose around the coffins as she spoke, long and slender things to claim them. Erd tree burial was supposedly a great honor, granted only to a select few. Naruto couldn't help but be disgusted by it. Why would anyone want their spirit to languish in the roots of a tree? Watching them be dragged down didn't sit well with him. Better to burn and soar in the sky. Malenia leaned against him, her head resting against his shoulder. I never want to go like that. He didn't miss the tremble in her voice. When I go, burn me. Set me free. Don't leave me trapped in the dark. Priscilla nodded her agreement and blayed with her. To even agree with such was blasphemy. It was a sign of everyone's grief that no one challenged them. Down the coffins went, dragged to the depths. Renna stepped up to them. Naruto tugged her close, letting her head rest against his chest as he pulled her close. Still the coffin sunk. The sight was too much for Renna. She fell to her knees with an awful wail. Here at last the heavens opened up and released their bounty. Rain slashed down from the grief-stricken sky, soaking them through, as though the gods themselves were mourning today's loss. Naruto knew better. The gods didn't care about them. They never had. And he'd just made a deal with the strangest of them all. Time would tell if it was the right choice or not. But how much time did he have left? This was not his room. The realization came as something of a sudden start to Naruto. He remembered laying down after a long day of productive research to rest, the excitement he'd felt as he struggled to sleep. The first of his needles was finally ready after nearly 2 years, and he was eager to test it on Malenia come morning. Things had been not better, not since the funeral, but they weren't bad, either. He remembered closing his eyes and falling asleep, more or less. That much made sense. But this was not his bed either. Good morning, Miquella. An all too familiar voice crooned. Or would you prefer Naruto? It wasn't morning at all, he realized, because there was no sun to be seen. Nor was there a moon at that. He was laid out on a verdant green plain, long blades of grass tickling his back. A sky full of endless stars awaited his vision, each a world in its own right, a reality all its own. He reached out for one and found he could actually touch it, his finger brushing that distant word. And in touching it, he saw, he heard, a rush of noise and emotion, of sights and sounds. He was looking at another iteration of himself, younger, paler, with silver hair, arguing bitterly with someone. Another reincarnation. He didn't know his name. No, wait, he did. A name came to him. Godric. This is wrong. The cycle has to end here. We must be better than this. What would you know? You're but the runt of the litter. Why did you have to say that? He gasped as his self snapped someone's neck. In the same instant he pivoted and drove a knife through someone's chest. Naruto felt the pain as though it were his own and shoved the scene away. What is this? This is a dream, and yet not a dream. He knew that voice. It's been some time, hasn't it? More than 730 days since last we spoke. I see you still prefer your true form in this realm. Understandable, given all that's transpired in the past. He raised his gaze and found the greater will sprawled out in the grass beside him, dark hair curtained behind her head. Why are you here? She crossed one leg over the other and sulked. Can I not visit your dreams? You can, but why you vanished after Rykard's funeral? She frowned. The loss of your kin still saddens you. It does. He waved her words away. But that's my burden to bear. It need not be. She sat up, gazing at him with eyes that rippled like the very cosmos. More shall fall in the days to come. He sprang upright. Who tell me so I can prevent their deaths? I do not know for certain. She tugged him back down. Fate is murky at the best of times. That is not why I am here. As he looked on, she stood fully. I have come here to reaffirm the final portion of our pact. No, a hand rose when he made to speak. Let me finish. In countless realities and tales, I have observed you, watched you. In some, I even opposed you. Why does he do this? I wonder why does go that way, why speak when he can do battle instead? You've been something of a mystery to me. Is that a compliment? She flashed him a dazzling smile. If you wish it to be. What I'm saying is this. Only in this reality, this story, this thread of fate, are we this close. She took his hand and guided it over another world. In it he glimpsed himself, looking as he always did, sitting on a grand throne. A woman in blue sat beside him. She had 4 arms. The greater will pulled their hands away, and the image vanished. Even so, I will offer you one last chance to escape. If you are uncertain, now is the time to back down. He heard a voice call to him in that instant. Brother, brother. Through a dim haze, he felt Malenia prod at him. Wake up, how long are you going to sleep? Ah, your twin is waiting for you. The greater will tossed her head to one side with a huff, running a hand through her hair. Be sure to use that needle on her when you wake. It should at least stymie the goddess of rot for a time. Do you want me gone that badly? Not at all. She smirked. I am a god, dear one. I can wait a while yet. You are already mine. The bargain is struck, pact made, the promise signed in. You're already mine. You simply have yet to realize it. Your body is in no danger in the waking world. If you wish to remain a while longer, it matters not. No, I'll stay for now. He firmed up his jaw. His answer was the same as it had been 2 years ago. Nothing's changed. The greater will bolt into his personal space. You still wish for us to remain equals. I do. The moment, the very instant he said those words, the dream around them wavered. As I'd hoped, her smile was a dangerous thing indeed. It frightened him and excited him. So you have spoken, so let it be. Now for the final act. The goddess tugged at the straps of her white dress and let it pool at her feet. She wasn't wearing anything underneath. Naruto's throat went dry. He frowned at her. You do realize this is a dream. None of this is real. Ah, a dream, he says. Her smile softened, becoming coy. In an instant she was in his lap, pressing the fullness of her form against him. You forget, I am the greater will. Dreams are as real or false as I will them to be, my champion. She waved a hand and his clothes vanished. She took the chance to push him down and straddled him. And I say let this be a good dream. She began to move atop him and the dream descended into a carnal haze. Tonight it came for her. Renna could hear it, crawling on the walls in the dark, climbing on library's ceiling, creeping ever closer with each passing moment. Doubtless the intruder thought themselves most quiet and clever. Striking in the midst of a thunderstorm no less, there was no chance they could be heard, let alone seen. By anyone save her. She had wards even here, spells that could tear even a demigod asunder. She could activate them in an instant and run him through, skewered him with countless sorceries, broken his mind with wicked illusions. A lifetime ago she would have done just that. Indeed, a younger Renna would have happily faced death on the field of battle and sent him packing, just as she had Radahn. Tonight she chose not to. In truth, she wasn't surprised that the creature came for her, only that it had taken so long. First Rykard had been slain, then Morgott. Was it any wonder it chose her as its third victim? Go on then, she muttered under her breath. Take me, I have lived long enough. She no longer cared for this life. Her family was shattered, her happiest years long behind her. What lay ahead but misery? But know this. If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. She heard Miquella's shadow known it was him the moment he breached her first ward dropped down from the ceiling. That, I don't doubt for a moment. You know why I'm here. I do, dear boy. She didn't bother to face him. Lightning cracked behind her and she glimpsed his shadow from the open door. I would ask that you wait a moment. In death she would ascend this realm and go to the stars. There she would find poor Rykard and Morgott and comfort them, as a true mother should, even if the latter wasn't truly her son. No matter, she would be kinder to them than Marika had ever been. Perhaps it was mad of her to think such, nay, it almost certainly was, but she hadn't been sane for quite some time now, had she? Rykard, cruelly ripped away from her. Renna grew more and more distant by the day. She eyed Miquella, doubtless intending to claim him for herself. Foolish child. Radahn, her oldest boy, he who she'd thought most loyal, had cut her deepest of all. He had chosen the Golden Order over her, besting the very stars themselves. The scholars of Rhea Lucaria were crippled thanks to his noble efforts. Betrayal upon betrayal, loss upon loss. Radahn, how her boiled to think of him. He had left her for that whore Marika and sired the accursed twins. A pox on them both. And now the latter's shadow came to silence her. As expected, Renna wasn't surprised. She couldn't even bring herself to be angry. She was just disappointed. In life, in love, in everything. Where was her happiness? Where was her happy ending? Why did Marika's brood thrive while her own faltered and failed even her precious sweetings? These fresh little lives she recreated using Radagon's egg were a disappointment. At least in death she could find some semblance of peace, if not freedom from this unending torment. But first she would have her answers. She would not go quietly into that good night. Not yet. Drawing herself up, she turned to face her killer fully. You killed my son. Kurama tugged down his mask and stared back at her without fear. He truly meant to kill her, then. He wouldn't let her see his face otherwise. She wouldn't be leaving this room alive. I did, he confessed readily, crossing both arms before his chest. Red eyes glared out at her beneath the messy mane of his blonde hair, whiskered cheeks dimpling in a scowl. I saw what Rykard would become and did the world a favor. The same could be said of Morgott. He would be an obstacle to my plans the future, so I killed him. Just as I'm going to kill Mohg once he exhausts his usefulness to Naruto. A clawed finger tapped against his right eye and she glimpsed a hint of something there. I wish I'd never seen these terrible things. But now that I have, I must act. Naruto, odd name. Her brow furrowed. For a reason such as that. For every reason. His gaze gleamed in the gloom. If you saw what I saw, if you knew what I knew in the desolation to come, then you'd know this for a mercy. Pretty words for a murderer. And now you've come to kill me, have you? I have. A ready nod was her reward. But first, I'll be taking that egg of yours. Hand it over. His right hand rose. You'll have no need of it where you're going. So that was his aim. He wished to fix his master and, quite possibly, his sister. He knew she'd never render the mate otherwise, spawn of Marika that they were. Perhaps it was possible for demigods to be reborn anew without the cursed taint in their veins. Perhaps not. She cared not a jot. Have it. She spat and tossed the egg at him, uncaring as Miquella's shadow deftly caught it and stowed it beneath his cloak. May it bring you as much pain as it did me. Something so large should not fit in one shroud so easily, but they were well past the point of pondering new mysterious now. Weren't they? You do realize your master will know, that he will realize what you have done here tonight. In you haste to save him, you have damned him instead. That's a risk I'm willing to take. The ghost of a smile tugged at his whiskered cheeks. Leyndell should be distracted tonight. There was something in his words just then, an awful realization that smote her soul. What have you done? I struck a bargain. He started walking toward her. I opened the gate, and now I pay my debt. Before her very eyes he grimaced in pain and dropped to a knee. Renna found herself frowning at him. What nonsense was this now? Had one of her stray spells caught him after all? A scream tore forth through the library. It didn't belong to her. No, she was the one who looked up now as the boy became something monstrous. He gained mass and size that shouldn't be possible, turning from man to beast in an instant, a creature so large that it had to hunch down onto all fours just to look at her. 9 scarlet tails bloomed behind him, a vulpine muzzle filling the entirety of her vision. Gods be good, its eye was bigger than her. Oh, she blinked. So that's what you really are. It seems I've underestimated you. It all made sense now to her. All of it. Every bit. Will there be pain? No. Its voice rattled her world. I won't take your soul as I did the others. You, at least, don't deserve to suffer. Take me then. Renna closed her eyes and spread her arms. I'm ready. Send me to Rykard and Morgott. The great beast rumbled a sigh. For what it's worth, I never hated you, Lady Renna. Giant jaws closed around her quickly, painlessly as promised. Renna left her body behind and rose to the stars. The time has finally come. Seek my study, Miquella. You'll find all the notes you need there and more. Wait, this is too sudden. You're starting to scare me here. Ranni, what did you? 2 fingers touched Naruto's forehead, a silent spell rooting him where he stood. Sleep, little brother of mine. Sleep until your time comes on this awful night. He tried to fight back, tried to resist. What night? What did she mean? It was no use. Sleep sank its gentle claws into him. She left him with 5 fateful words. I shall love thee, always. And so he slept. I'm sorry. Reality snapped back, woke with a start. Just as well it did, too, because someone kicked in his door. Naruto tumbled out of bed, fumbling for a weapon and finding none. It still saved his life, because a flung dagger landed where his head had been only a few moments before. He slapped another aside, hissing as it cut a dark furrow in his hand. He had time enough to glimpse 9 dark figures, each robed in black, daggers in hand. There, a leader saw him and thrust a finger forward. Kill the boy quickly. Marika's line shall die this night. Do what must be done. Do not hesitate. Show no mercy. Not good odds. His heart sank into his stomach. Any chance we could talk about this? It soared a moment later as the ringleader died with a wide gurgle. Heed my words. A familiar, laconic voice intoned as the blade twisted in their chest. You will kill no more this night. Melenia slammed into the room, driving the dying assassin before her, still skewered on her blade. With her free hand she reached out and crushed another's face in her palm, whipping them around into their fellows. Face carved from stone, blade in hand, she waded in, silent as the grave. She smashed into the group, sword swinging. 2 more died in an instant, and yet more were driven back into the hall with vicious swings. More, but not all. 3 were upon him. They moved quickly, hastily, eager to be done with the deed. Foolish. He slapped a hand to the ground and the floor became so much mud beneath their feet. It barely slowed them, but the respite was all he needed. Boy, this body may be small, but I can still kick your ass 7 ways to Sunday. He planted his foot and swept an arm forward. 4 fingers crooked in a come-hither motion as the other curled into a fist behind his spine. Come on, let me show you why they call me an Imperion. Naruto reached across a nearby table, grabbing the first thing within reach. It would have to do. I'll kill you all with this teacup. He brandished a gold cup with intent. How's that sound? 2 actually paused. More fools they. The third lunged with a wordless hiss. He slammed the cup into their chest and twisted. Down they went. The other 2 paused, made wary by such sudden brutality. What's wrong? You were so eager a second ago. He lunged at them with a mad cackle. The black knives reaped a grim toll. Naruto cursed them for it, his carefully crafted facade of Miquella breaking but briefly as he beheld the bodies. The carnage. Come the dawn, most of the assassins were slain or captured. Most, but not all, and the damage was already done. Leyndell lay sundered, the royal family gutted by blackest betrayal. Nothing would be the same. Godwyn and Ranni were gone. He'd seen their bodies. Radahn had gone herring off after the stragglers in a towering rage, hounding them out of the capital to chase them through the Altus Plateau. Radahn lay blinded. The healers were uncertain whether his sight would ever return. Regardless, his right arm would not. Marika had shut herself away and wouldn't to see anyone, not even her own family. Malenia outright refused to leave his side. Kurama had vanished. Everything was in disarray. Thus it fell to him to pick up the pieces. He didn't want to, but someone had to. It fell to him. No night like taking orders from someone who appeared to be a child. But orders from a child were better than no orders at all. He wasn't about to waste the precious time he had in his adult form on them. He needed every second he could get. In the end they capitulated to his commands. Well, his commands and Malenia's glares. What choice did they have? Rykard might have been able to rally the men, lead them better than he, but they'd been dead for ages now and Morgott with him. Who else did that leave Mohg and his wretched little Suro so eager to fawn over him? No, it fell to him. It always did. Anger threatened to break through. It took more effort than he cared to admit. He was tired of this. So very tired. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe it should just end. Maybe, just maybe. My lord, what are you standing around for? He looked up from his chair and snapped at a stunned tree sentinel. Find me the ones who did this or you'll join them. Miquella led well. Of course he did. He was her brother. He sat the throne like he was born to it. No one else could command their forces in this time of crisis. No one else could rally their men. No one else could assure the people that all was well. Malenia preened a little as she watched him browbeat a final of the tree sentinels to their duties. The last of the knights dithered a moment, then saw her standing coming down the stairs, him, blade drawn. He gave a quick, hurried bow and scarpered down the long staircase leading back to the sanctuary. Her dearest twin sighed and slumped upon the throne. It seemed to dwarf his small body. She lingered behind the ladder, unwilling to speak. Didn't have to, really, he did that for her. Were you watching the whole time? A little. She granted him a small smile. You did well. I didn't want to interrupt you. How's mother? He wouldn't look at her. Instead he looked up, gazing at the Erd-tree towering above them. Still raving mad. Malenia winced even at the reminder even as she said it. Losing Godwyn broke something deep inside her. She may never be whole again. And father, he will be blind. There it was, his grim fate revealed at last. You did your best, all you could. My best isn't good enough, he muttered into his fist. Never is. She was right. Something stilled in her sullen, silent soul. She had some wench approached her brother. He didn't seem to hear her, he was too busy muttering to himself. I tried so hard to be kind, to be gentle, to be fair, tried so hard and got so far, but in the end it doesn't matter. Miquella, forget I said anything. Her twin shook his head and looked to her at last. Still, you have good timing. He reached into his belt. There's something I need to give you. So speaking, he held out something for her to see. Here, come closer. Malenia did as her brother bade without hesitation. She could do no less. She gazed upon the item in question, not quite comprehending at first. It was unalloyed gold, yet also dark ebony, black and yellow twined within one another before tapering off into a fine point. Is that what I think it is? Hopefully. He offered the needle unto her. I just finished it this afternoon. Try it. Reverently, she did so, took it from his hand and set it to her flesh just below her ribcage. Here it was, the moment of truth. Closed her golden eyes, Malenia took a deep breath to steady herself, then she thrust it in with brutal dispatch. Her entire body quivered, convulsed now, as she trembled from head to toe. The effect was immediate as it was pleasing. There was no pain. The rot ceased to writhe within her, stopped pressing down on her temples and tainting her every thought. How is it? Beautiful, glorious, peace incarnate. She opened her eyes and rolled her shoulders. There's no pain. Good. His head bobbed in agreement. I'll have to make more, but this way, you won't need me by your side every hour of every day. The words hurt her more than she thought they would. It sounded like he was going away. Nonsense, surely. There was still so much to see and do. Surely their journey couldn't be nearing its end. Not yet. They still had to save the lands between and avenge the Night of Black Knives. She still needed to figure out her feelings. It was too soon to call this an ending. Surely Miquella was her brother. It was wrong to feel this way. She had seen what had come of two siblings having a go at one another. She and Miquella were proof of that. The path they trod upon promised disaster. Yet she could not simply let go. Not just yet. She snatched at his sleeve and tugged. Wait. She cuddled him close now, holding him to her chest one might a teddy bear. I don't want to go. I wish to stay like this just a little while longer. He would interrogate the Black Knife ringleader that very night. It wasn't something Naruto was looking forward to. Worse, it was something he had to do alone. Without Kurama. His old friend had returned from Raya Lucaria, looking inordinately pleased with himself. Yes, he was up to something. He didn't know what it was, but whatever it might be, it threatened to upset the delicate balance he'd fought so hard to create. No, had to be him. No one else could be trusted with this, and no one else would see what he was about to do. He swung the cell door open. Darkness awaited him, an abyss teeming within. There was no light here. He'd seen to it personally. The Black Knives liked working in the shadows, did they fine. Let them live in them. See how long they lived without light. He conjured a small flame to his hand and lit a torch. Set it into a brazier, now. Flickering flame flashed forth, revealing the prisoner. Chains rattled in the dark, they're bound by chains and curses most foul. She looked quite the sight. Not surprising. Malenia had not been kind to those who sought his death. Nor was he. She stared at him coldly, bruised face framed by blonde hair, dirt, and bruises. A woman of Newman heritage just like the rest, it only made them all the more difficult to subdue, let alone capture. This one had lost her right eye and several fingers besides. Alecto, her name was. He'd learned it from one of the survivors before he disposed of them. Stripped of all armor and weapons and pressed into a rough linen shift, she hardly seemed a threat anymore. Naruto knew better. These assassins were not to be underestimated, even chained. And so he wouldn't. Enjoying your accommodations. Silence was her answer. You're going to die, he informed her primly. All that remains is the matter of your death. It can be peaceful or painful. This is the choice I offer you. Tell me why you did this, who you work for. She spat in his face. A sigh trickled out of him. Was that really necessary? You're only making things more difficult for yourself. She laughed at him. Do you think I fear you? Boy Electo's voice was a dull rasp, allowing him to glimpse the missing teeth in her mouth. I do not. She'd been interrogated already, he realized, but by whom he knew not. Regardless, she didn't look to have broken to them in any case. Little boy, little failure, little demigod. You will die, you and all your kin. In the end you are alone. You will always be alone. HMMHM. You make a fair argument. Allow me to offer my rebuttal. He reached up to wipe the spittle from his face, but didn't strike her. He was above such things. Instead he took his adult form once more, burning up precious seconds if only to make his point. Judging by the way Alecto squawked in surprise, it was a point well made. Not so little now, he tilted his head. You're right. All men must die sooner or later, be they mortals or gods. The same is true for all women as well. It was also true for your daughter, Titch. Alecto froze. You didn't. You wouldn't dare. You're too soft for murder. I was, once. Not anymore. And unfortunately for you, I'm far from alone. He drew a blade from his belt and slashed a wide trench in his arm, opening from elbow to wrist. The abrupt loss nearly staggered him outright, but he stood firm and tore the blade free from the wound, preventing it from healing just yet. An open wound was required for this. Reeling a little, he steadied himself against the wall, took a brisk step back and let it drip down. Pool across the floor. That puddle grew larger as Alecto looked on aghast. A great hulking shape emerged from the depths to tower over them both. You called, dearest Miquella. Here at last Naruto saw the fear on Alecto's face. No, the word was a whisper, a most fervent prayer. You wouldn't. You won't. You can't. I would, I will, and I can. Oh, now she was afraid of him, the gall of it all. You had your chance. He reached down to take her chin in his hand and gave her face a vicious squeeze. You could have confessed. You could have turned your cloak. I might have even let you work with me if you truly felt guilty for all those murders. He hardened his heart to what was to come. Now you will learn plain glimpsed only in myth, suffering whispered in the darkest of dreams, agony you can only imagine. He turned to Mohg. Take her. Make her talk, but make sure she doesn't die before she reveals everything she knows. No price is too great. The one-eyed omen bowed. Of course, dear one. I live to serve. Naruto shuddered. His lips curled in disgust, his very skin crawled in revulsion. Kurama and the others would understand. It would be fine. This fiend had his uses. He was using him. No more, no less. He would not fall for any tricks. Steeling himself, he closed his own wound and stepped to Alecto now. From there he brandished his blade in her face. She tried to shy away, but the chains wouldn't let her. In the end, he cut a deep visceral slice down her cheek. The wound wept freely, as did she. Please mercy. Close your heart to it. She is an enemy. There is no mercy. Not anymore. It turned back to Mohg. You may begin. Morgott's brother dissolved into so much boiling and dove through Alecto's wound to enter her body, pouring through with a raspy chuckle. Alecto tried to resist. She even managed it for a full 30 seconds. Then she broke and screamed. She kept screaming as her eyes rolled back into her head. Naruto watched it all without blinking. He said not a word. In the span of a single week, everything changed. The demigods were vulnerable, for the lands between had seen 2 of their number died, and the rest of them bleed. And as the age-old saying went, if it bleeds, it can be killed. Those who survived had to do more than merely pick up the pieces left behind by their kin. They were forced to weave their way through a web of dissent and deceit as the realm realized one immutable truth. Their gods were not infallible, but they were vengeful, and for their assassins paid a bitter toll for the night of black knives. In the end, Alecto sang like a canary. It was inevitable when one considered the torture she'd been through. One could only last so long with their boiling in their very veins. Mohg was quite thorough. She would live, though she would dearly wish she had not. Being sealed away in an evergale and left to rot for the rest of your days was a thoroughly unpleasant experience, or so he'd been told. He supposed her final fate didn't much matter. She'd sold her conspirators up the river, and Radahn was even now scouring the lands between, tearing them out wherever they hid, root and stem. And that's what happened, your lordship. Dissent was rife in the realm, and thus it fell to him and Malenia to put things right. Right. He was still holding court, wasn't he so annoying? I'm sorry for your losses, Edgar, was it? Yes, my lord Miquella. The battered knight before him sketched another bow, head all but scraping the floor as he finished his heartfelt You honor me with this audience." A murmur passed through the assembled nobles, and not at all a pleasant one. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose with a sigh and grit his teeth to stave off a migraine. Insolent backbitters. If this was the calm before the storm, then he wished the wise storm would hurry up and get here already. He was tired. More than that, he found he didn't much like ruling. Some might say that made him good at it, but he disagreed. Heavy is the head that wears the crown and all that. Really, it felt like he was just waiting for the hammer to fall, the other shoe to drop, all hell to break loose. How did anyone live with this kind of tension it was doing his head in? My lord, blast, he'd almost forgotten about poor Edgar again. Focus, I understand your plight. He really didn't, but with Malenia standing guard behind him, he would pretend he did. Fake it until you make it, that sort of thing. We will send a detachment of Erdtree sentinels to help you pacify the misbegotten that have overtaken your fortress. Castle Morn will be returned you, on that, you have my word. Begging your pardon, lord. The man bowed his head again, dark hair briefly hiding his eyes as wrung his hands fretfully. I is hoping you could tend to the matter yourself or perhaps send your blade. The latter was said with a long, lingering look, Malenia's gaze raking over her red hair. I'm sure a demigod would put proper fear into those foul monsters. Not a chance. If he left Leyndell he might not come back. It was already tempting to bugger off, walking beyond the fog, and leave this world to rot. Far too tempting. He could resist such here in the capital while he kept himself distracted, if only just. And he needed Malenia here to help keep order. If she left no one would listen to a child at all. No, he would let his chosen handle this and pray they didn't make a mess of things. Maybe he could just hand this all off to Radahn once he finished hunting down the Black Knives. But for now, I'm afraid we cannot be spared. But worry not, he amended when he saw anger cloud the old knight's visage. Your daughter shall be safe here in the capital and well looked after. And because Malenia looked interested at that and he wasn't in the mood, may attend my sister as her personal handmaiden until your return. You have my word. But my lord, Malenia leaned low to whisper in his ear. He questioned you. We should kill them. He looked back over his shoulder, wondering if his sister was joking. She was not. Doom danced in her eyes. Malenia, no. His twin subsided with a soft sigh, his look back. That will be all, Edgar. The weary knight bowed an SCD and said all the right words, but Naruto saw the flame of rebellion in his eyes. He just couldn't bring himself to care. If someone thought they could do a better job at ruling than him, they were welcome to try. He'd happily pay someone their weight in rune to take this chair from him. Muttering a parting farewell, he waved him on and attended to the next supplicant. Something about destroyed cabbages or some such. Fey. He paid the man his runes and bid him farewell. He had bigger concerns and bigger fish to fry. Morgott would have been better suited to this. Rykard could have cowed these people into submission with but a glance. Anyone a NYON would have been better suited to this. But they were all dead. Dead, destroyed, and gone. At least most were beyond pain. Would that the rest of them were so fortunate. Radahn was still a blind man, missing his arm and eyes beside, neither of which would regrow no matter the magic he used. Narika had left her chambers at last but now wandered the halls like a wraith, a bottle of wine never far from her hand. Everyone would could have led were dead or too wounded, or no longer sane. Radahn seemed determined to avoid the capital at all costs, though he was perfectly healthy, likely because he feared the onus of leadership and all the burdens that came with it. Melenia was a follower, not a leader. He had given her the throne for a day and she tried to have all the nobles hanged because they annoyed her. As for Mohg, no. 1,000 times no. He wasn't leaving Leyndell in his hands. And so, once again, it fell to him to lead this pack of parasites. The thought soured his mood, reminding him of something. He rose from the Elden throne. That will be all for today. There was still one small matter to attend to. Well, not so small, really. He put it off long enough. Krek. Kurama took the punch in good grace and let it carry him backward, head snapping to the side as his back crashed against a wall. Naruto didn't give him the chance to retort, much less defend himself. He slammed an arm against his throat and held it there, all but choking him out, practically promising to do if he said something he didn't like. When were you going to tell me, Kurama? Credit where it was due, his old friend didn't flinch. He'd cornered him, and yet despite that, he still didn't falter. Tell you what, don't play dumb. He tightened his grip on him. Renna's been missing, and Malenia's shadow vanished just last night. Yet you were nowhere to be found. I haven't the foggiest idea what you... He punched the wall beside his head, splintering it. No games. All right. His old friend lowered his hands. Yes, that was me. I'm responsible for her disappearance. Disappearance or death. The silence was telling, damning even. How many more have you killed all this time, Kurama? Behind my back. It was the strangest thing, seeing his old face stare back at him with such placid calm. There wasn't so much as an iota of guilt in Kurama's gaze. He felt no pity for the souls he'd taken, no remorse for those he'd sent to the hereafter. A response he would have understood. But this stoic silence that couldn't bear it. Surely his old friend had a reason for this. An explanation. He must have. He wouldn't just kill all those people without provocation now, would he? What would you have me say? This is for the good of everyone. The good of everyone or just me? Damn it, he let him go and whirled away, running his hands through his long hair. I didn't want this. I never wanted this. What have you done? Nothing you wouldn't have. He wanted to punch him so damn hard. Instead, he felt sick to his stomach. How many? Kurama actually made him say it, the bastard. How many what? He whirled back to him, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and slammed him into the wall. How many lives have you taken? Enough. I struck a bargain for your sake. Then unstrike it, he gave him a good hard shake. Bring them back. I can't. Even now his erstwhile ally remained unfazed. I wouldn't even if I could. I won't stop. I can't. You'll have to kill me. He tilted his head, regarding him with a small, sad smile. But you won't. We're friends. Deep down, I know you understand why I'm doing this. Understand? He understood that he wanted to throttle him. This isn't who you are. Why? And Kurama grabbed him by the wrist and broke his grip, forcing him to let go or risk his arm breaking. This is always who I've been. I've only ever cared for a select few people. This lot. He waved his free hand with a gesture of utter disgust. They're nothing. Peasants, knights, gods. I don't care about them. I never have. I care about you. Nothing else matters. I didn't realize you were going around killing people. Yes, you did. A slow blink damned him. You just didn't want to admit it. And they're not people, but ants. Nausea roiled Naruto's stomach. He nearly choked on it, even more so the realization that, for all his quips, Kurama was serious. They are not ants, aren't they? Kurama tapped a finger to his chin. A giant doesn't mourn those he crushes underfoot. He moves onward, upward, ever higher. This isn't our world, Naruto. These aren't our people. If it was, I wouldn't be doing this. Malenia clearly means something to you. Out of respect for that, I've let her be. His hand fell, clenching into a rare fist at his side. As far as I'm concerned, everyone is fair game. But why? Here at last, Kurama lost his temper. To save you, fool. There it was again, that bargain of his. Save me from what? The door crashed open in a rush, slamming against the wall with a harsh crack to startle them terribly. A messenger stumbled in, wasted and gasping for air. Belatedly he recognized him as one of Radahn's men. He looked at proper sight. Someone had cut out his eye and his body looked to be a mass of yellow and purple bruises beneath his armor. Even so, he saluted and did his duty without fail. My Lord General Radahn has gone mad. He's laying waste to the lower city. Naruto rounded on Kurama. What did you do this time? Nothing. His old friend looked every bit as surprised as he felt. This is new. I didn't have anything to do with this. Where are you going? To stop him, he snarled over his shoulder. Stay here. You step one toe out of this room and I'm chopping it off. He found Radahn rampaging through the lower city. In all fairness, it wasn't hard. He just had to follow the fleeing civilians and walk in the opposite direction. From there it was merely a matter of listening for the sounds of combat and following those. It took him less than 5 minutes to track his half-brother down. All the while his mind went on a rampage of his own, failing to understand what was happening. Rounding a bend, he arrived just in time to see 2 Erdtree sentinels crashing through a fountain. He winced despite himself, then rallied. What the hell are you doing? Ranni's sibling rounded on him, smiled grimly, and stepped over the dazed body of an Erdtree sentinel. Dying, little brother. Those words may as well have been a knife in his gut, such did they wound him. What? The good general turned his head aside and tugged at the collar of his armor, revealing a lurid black mark on his thick neck. It pulsed as he looked on, cracks spreading across his flesh, reaching fingers of fine fractures up to his chin. He knew the symbol well. It was the mark of those black blades. Not instantly lethal, and that was a testament to the general's vitality, but the wound was fatal all the same. Naruto's heart sank into his stomach. No, yes. His smile didn't waver, but it seemed sad now, somehow. How? I was careless and angry, his half-brother declared. I hounded the assassins from the capital, chased them across the lands between, and slew them all, every last one. The last one managed marked me before I slew her all the same. He let his hands fall and idly, Naruto noticed his trembling fingers. I can barely feel my arms. I've little time left, maybe a day at best. Worse, I can feel the wound spreading. It was but a tiny cut an hour ago, and now look what was become of me. Naruto shoved down his fear and stomped toward him. I can fix this. I can heal you. Radahn arched an eyebrow. Like you healed Malenia's rot. He winced. Maybe I just need time. We both know the best you can do is forestall it. Radahn rolled his shoulders with a rueful sigh and shook his head. Death is far more powerful than the scarlet rot. Even if you found a remedy to delay it, I would waste away slowly. Become a pale shadow of my former self. A coward's death that is not who I am. His fist swung out, obliterating an empty building. From there he reached up and drew forth his star-scourged greatswords. I shall not perish like Godwin and Renna. I wish to fall into battle at the hand of a worthy foe. That is why I caused such chaos. I knew it would draw you here, Melenia. Horror dawned in him, and with it, realization. Don't say it. You must kill me. His facade cracked right down the middle. Of course, because that was what it came back to, in the end. Naruto hid his face behind one palm to stifle a sigh, one that warped into a sob as tears gathered in his eyes. It shouldn't be like this. Why was this world so broken? Was there truly no other way? Is this really what you want? It is. Radahn lurched forward. I've wanted to fight you for years. Please, Miquella, fight me. Best mean kill me. Something ugly bubbled up in him. Naruto startled to laugh. It was an awful broken sound, a peal of purest pain. Then he swore. He spat and snarled and stomped, tearing great furrows out of the ground. The earth cratered underfoot, his bones split and began to crack, but he didn't care. He felt Kurama power flow into him from afar. He wanted to shove it away, but he couldn't. It mended his injuries and stole away the pain, leaving only a numbness behind. One last thing. Radahn readied himself, adopting a low stance, sword scraping the ground. When I die, you must promise to hold back the stars in my stead. I've left notes in my study, just like Renna. Why? Radahn shuddered a little, and for the first time in a long time, he saw a hint of fear in his eyes. There are things out there in the cosmos, horrors that you do not know, monsters that not even a god can fight. Promise me you won't let them near, Miquella. He fixed him with a steady stare. Promise me. Another responsibility heaped on his shoulders. He was so sick of it all. But who else was there to shoulder such a burden? No one else could. I promise. Good. The good general nodded loosely. That's good. You and Malenia will rule well. I know you will. You have good hearts. She might. He really didn't. His was blackened by all his dark deeds, those he knew and those he unwittingly allowed under his watch. I sent Jaren and a squad of my best men ahead of me to tell the queen. Radahn prattled on, heedless of his raging emotions. You won't be blamed for my death. You'll have their swords at your side, if nothing else. Because that was what it would come to. If he didn't stop Radahn here, Malenia would. There was no way this didn't end without someone dying. He burst into his adult form with a snarl, gaining mass and height in an instant. You were my brother, Radahn. I loved you. I know, little brother. As did I now to battle. Malenia heard the explosion before she saw it. Startled, she spun toward the window. Only then did she see the smoke. No, surely they wouldn't. Would they? Well met. Miquella. Radahn boomed a laugh as he lumbered forward, spitting, one eye weeping red. Finally a worthy opponent. Our battle shall be legendary. Naruto found himself mirroring the man's grin despite himself. This guy was just too damn nice, honorable to a fault, in refusing to disparage him even now that they were at odds with one another. He couldn't possibly be Renna or Rykard's sibling. Or maybe he'd grown so noble and kind because those two were such bitter, cruel souls. Regardless, it didn't change what he had to do. All right. With a groan, he dragged himself upright. I'll finish this. He took hold of his drooping shoulder, Arg, and popped it back into place. You know, he rasped out, bending down to retrieve his weapon, I'm glad I met you. Radahn grinned right back, a pure and boyish thing for one so large. And are you to battle? It would prove a short one. He ducked a swing, parried another, and conjured a racing shuriken to his palm. Radahn saw it and tried to leap away too late. The death mark slowed him. It gave Naruto the time he needed to gather his legs beneath him, leap up after him, and smashed his penultimate technique headlong into the man's chest. Armor tore, flesh sundered, flew through the air. Radahn struck the ground first and slumped there. He alighted beside him in a pointed crouch and waited for him to rise. Remarkably, he didn't. Dreading what he might see, Naruto tentatively took a hold of his shoulder and rolled him over now. His eyes widened a little at the horror he found there. The cracks from the death mark had spread further still, his face was beginning to crumble, falling apart like so much sundered stone. His lower jaw was gone. He could no longer speak, but those rich golden eyes were still alive. In that instant, he heard a voice in his end. Finish me, please. Naruto closed his eyes, took up the general's blade, and brought it down in a singular sweep. Radahn made a final gurgling noise and slumped at his feet, light draining from his eyes. Thank you, Miquella. Marika felt Radahn die. Another child of hers, lost to her own foolishness. This had not been the plan. It had never been the plan. Only Miquella, Malenia, and Mohg remained. But they would die, too, wouldn't they? Everyone was doomed, all her plans for naught. Radahn was ruined. Godfrey was gone. The Greater will had forsaken her. Enough. Let it end. Let it all end. She stood before the altar and brought her hammer down with a scream. Her swing went wide. She missed, her vision still blurry from tears. Or maybe it was the drink. Her head was feeling fuzzy, her emotions ruling her. Snarling, she righted herself and took aim once more. In another world, another time, another lands between, Radahn would have sought to stop her. But in this T-Meline, he was a broken blind man, missing both his wits and his dominant arm. Without him there to slow her, history took a different turn, and it was an ugly one. Marika raised her hammer, took a deep, shuddering breath. Her shoulders trembled with a sob. Ashes. Her world was ashes, and her legacy with it. No longer. Today it all changed. Her hammer rose and fell with the grief of a broken mother. The Elden Ring shattered in 3 strikes, as did the lands between. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.